Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I'll officially call to the meeting to order. Today's September 28th, 2021, here in Palm Desert and virtually. I'd like to make, before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I'll make these introductory remarks. I'd like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to the Brown Act waivers provided for under the governor's executive orders in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. Today's meeting is presented in a hybrid format, both in person at CVW's Steve Robbins Administration Building and via Zoom. Governor's executive orders N2520 and N2920 suspend certain requirements of the Brown Act, and district board members and staff may choose to participate in person or by video conference. This meeting is being live streamed on the district's website and YouTube channel. Members of the public may also join via Zoom, and Zoom details are on the agenda. Members of the public who wish to comment on any item on the agenda or within the jurisdiction of the district have 3 minutes. Public comment may be provided in person, via Zoom, or by emailing the clerk of the board in advance of the meeting. Such meetings will become part of the board meeting record, and if you're on Zoom, use the hand raise feature to get our attention, and we'll make sure that we'll call on you. I'll now, and then as far as considering items, I'll make sure to be clear where we are, and in particular calling on our remote board member, Vice President Estrada, to make sure that he participates. And all of our action will be by roll call vote. And with that, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And roll call, please.
Good morning, President Powell,
Here.
Vice President Estrada, Director Estrada, you may be muted. I see you on the line. I see you online.
See his mouth moving?
*6, Director Estrada. Well, I know he's, I see him on there, so I will go ahead and note that he is present.
Well,
Director
I think
Bianco,
we need two-way communication for him to be present, don't we?
we'll come back.
We'll come back, okay.
In the meantime, I'll send him a message. Director Bianco,
Here.
Director Aguilar,
Here.
and Director Nelson.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, so let us know when you're able to establish communication with Director Estrada. Do we have any additions, deletions, or adjustments to today's agenda?
No, sir, not that been brought to my attention.
Me either. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment, recognizing that we may have somebody here for a specific item? We can call on you at that time, or you could come up and make comments now. Do we have anyone online wishing to make comment? Public comment?
No.
Nope.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
No,
that's
we
all
do
right.
not.
We need to leave lots of time. Things move slowly. In this case, this brings us to the consent calendar, items 5A through H. I wanted to pull, I guess for discussion, 5B, which is the general manager's report.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the remaining.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
President Powell
Aye.
and Vice President Estrada messaged me and said he's having some issues, so we're working on that with him. Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Okay, 4-0.
Passed 4-0 with one absent. And then, yeah, just on 5B, I noticed on page 17 that we, is Katie here? We had I noticed we hadn't had any water waste penalties, and then all of a sudden in August, we had 7. I didn't see any for any of the prior months. So something happened or something changed? I was just curious what happened.
Something changed. So we were not finding people during the COVID-19 pandemic situation. We were just continuing the education efforts. But as things have alleviated and our offices are open and people can get assistance from us, we've gone back to our normal processes.
Okay, so is that typical for a month?
Yeah.
I noticed this is prior months 0, so that was during the COVID. So it's not a new, so this is somebody that's been warned and visited and all these things? And
Right, correct. And so when we, just to give some background information, so if we notice a water waste, our first attempt is just to make contact with that customer and let them know we've seen it. 9 times out of 10, they just don't know because they don't watch their sprinklers run. Then they will, if we haven't contacted them or we need to send, like they're a seasonal resident, we send a letter. They have 30 days to make the repair. If they make the repair, then we're all well and good. If they don't, they'll receive a $50 fine, and then the fines escalate from there. I would say, again, 9 times out of 10, we don't go to, there is no fine. But on occasion, we have people who get fined over and over and over again. Sometimes these come from entities that can't just make a quick decision, like an HOA board that needs to vote on fixing a broken sprinkler, which, believe it or not, does happen. But most of the time, these things are handled very quickly and usually with some gratitude, as a lot of times it's people who just had no idea that they had something that was broken.
Okay, so the initial penalty is $50?
Correct.
And that's following on some significant contact?
Yes,
Okay.
and we do patrol, and then we also allow customers to report. So if a customer sees something, we go out, make sure we see it with our own eyes and,
Right.
Verify it's there and try and get in touch with the customer.
Okay, good. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Also noticed in the report, and maybe this has been there before and I didn't notice it, but I noticed it today, was this IT section.
Oh, it is relatively.
Yeah, I don't know how new it is.
This is the 2nd or 3rd month that we've
But
had.
it was extensive, and what's interesting in there is how many threats we're facing. I mean, constantly. A variety of different threats that we need to suppress. Anyways, I thought that was really good information, and I'll move approval of the item.
Second?
A roll call, please.
President Powell?
Aye.
I'm going to skip Director Estrada because I know we're still having technical issues. Director Bianco?
Aye.
Director Aguilar?
Aye.
And Director Nelson? And so, speaking of technology,
Bro, yeah.
President Powell, if we can, we're having some issues with, it's actually Zoom, and so my participants, including Director Estrada, cannot see or hear anything, so we need to do a quick reboot. If the board would please engage me and take a 2-minute break while I shut down
should
and
do that.
restart, please.
Okay, thank you. As far as the anniversaries go, we have Michael Jimenez, field service rep with 20 years, and I'm assuming he's out there working. He's not here. And then we have Ron Alexander, operations manager, 20 years, and we have a presentation there. And then Ricardo Esquivel, domestic water service worker 3 with 20 years, and I believe he's not here either. But so as far as Ron Alexander, a Palm Springs High graduate with a range of college and professional classes, Ron's first step in the water world was as a utility worker at Mission Springs Water District. The opportunity to grow drew him to CVWD, and Ron started with CVWD in September 17th,
You are muted.
2001, where he rose from domestic equipment operator to domestic crew chief to domestic supervisor, and most recently in 2019 to operations manager in construction and maintenance. His direct area of influence involves managing and motivating his crew of 52 employees. The team is responsible for providing construction and maintenance to the domestic water system, including 24/7 emergency repair service. Ron says that we don't leave until the job is done, and when we leave, you wouldn't know we were there. We take pride in everything we do. From adrenaline pumping large leaks to work days that top 12 hours, Ron says the job he loves has no dull moments. Ron is always on the go with a dynamic job which matches his personality, and when he's not working, he loves traveling, camping, and boating with his family. His family includes his wife Dawn, CVW accounts receivable technician, and 5 children from 14 to 27, with 1 college graduate, 1 in college, and 3 in high school, which would explain why he's not retiring. His assistant director says Ron is a leader in the water industry who is always ready for a challenge. We're very fortunate to have someone of his caliber on the team. Anyways, and we'll have a presentation with I believe there's just over there. So we'll come on up. But let me read the other one first, and we'll do them together. So as far as the retirements go, Bobby Delgado, water treatment operator 2 with 35 years, and then present is Abel Zabalza, mechanical technician 2 with 20 years. And for Abel, 20 years of service with CVWD with 15 years in the sanitation mechanical department. His supervisor, Andy, says, I've had the honor of working with Abel for 3.5 years, and I've never hear him complain. He never backed down from any job and was always one of the first to come in and the last to leave. And when given any task, his response was always, let's do this. Abel's skill set is one of the highest that I have seen, and with the many different pieces of equipment in the wastewater industry, he's valuable beyond words. His work truck is impeccably clean and everything is organized and labeled, so anyone can find anything quickly. Abel is married to his lovely wife, Marcella, of 44 years with 3 sons and 8 grandchildren. His son, Gerald, is continuing the CVWD legacy as an equipment operator in the stormwater division, while the other 2 have solid careers with Southern Pacific Railroad. Abel has a caring heart, and this trait shows when he works with others to make sure they have the proper PPE, tools, and even will start his generator to make sure his colleagues have warm meal at the job site. With his work ethic, you question his age, he will stand side by side with anyone and challenge the younger people to keep up with his pace. To replace Abel is going to be a huge task, as we will always compare his skills and accomplishments to uphold the high standard that Abel has set. We will all miss him and support his milestone and new chapter in his life. Thank you, Abel, for everything you've done for the betterment of the mechanical department. So congratulations, and both of you come on up. Abel, have this.
We'll do you first, if you don't mind. Sure. I gotta give this to the folks. All right.
Which way we're pointing?
So if we put those down for a minute, we'll take care of Ron. Congratulations on that. Just a minute. We'll get Ron in the spotlight first. Not that they're not as important. But he's gotta go back to work. Indirect lighting and direct lighting. All right, now's your opportunity. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, just thankful. Very thankful.
No, we're thankful. Thank you. Stay healthy.
Okay,
Abel.
Congratulations.
yeah. Congrats. Good luck to you.
All right. I just shook hands with Ron, so I haven't sanitized yet. That's pretty cool. One more. Andy's gonna tell us a joke.
Nope.
Now it's your turn.
Floor is
Do you have any
yours,
comments
Dave.
you want to?
No, I just want to thank everyone for, it's been a wonderful 20 years here, so something to say.
So hopefully you have at least 20 more without us.
We will, Rick.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
For everything you've done. Enjoy your retirement.
Yeah,
Thank you.
congratulations. All right, so how are we doing on the,
We are working through it, and what we've identified is it's something on the Zoom end. So
Okay.
we're asking panelists and participants, Director Estrada and those in the audience to call in via the phone.
Okay.
So they should be calling in
Okay.
shortly.
all right, well, we have more non-action items, so I believe we can continue through items 8A and B and C. 8A, written communications. We had one that was resolved. I don't see any others. So that's in the board packet and online. We have an informational report on the update of the developer fee cost of service study for water systems backup facilities charge. Looks like Carrie Oliphant is presenting, and we'll have an opportunity for comment following the presentation. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning. So last board meeting, I presented on one of the aspects of the developer fee cost of service study, which was the offset fee. Today, I'm going to talk about the water system backup facility charge, which is the second of the, second of the three charges that we're looking at. So we're looking at the first one today, this one. Okay, so just a little background, the water system backup facility charge is considered a capacity charge. Capacity charges are developed and charged in accordance with Government Code 66013. They're collected from new development to buy into existing public facilities or pay for new public facilities that are of benefit to the person or property being charged. The funds that we collect from the capacity charges are restricted and can only be spent for the purposes in which the charges were collected. And in addition, the capacity charges are not subject to the Prop 218 notification requirements, and they can be adopted at the discretion of the board.
You can watch it back.
So how the existing water system backup facility charge works is it's a one-time charge that we collect from new development at the time a new meter is requested. The charges are used to pay for backup facilities, such as off-site water transmission mains, wells, reservoirs, anything with a regional benefit. The purpose of the charge is to have growth pay for growth so that we aren't burdening our existing customers. And just for background, the last time that this charge was updated was in 2012. So since 1978, with the passing of Prop 13, capital construction costs for new domestic water facilities have been borne by developers through this CVWD's water system backup facility charge. So it's a funding mechanism to pay for these backup facilities that are necessary to support growth and development. In this current update, as well as in past studies, we've used the buy-in method that's described in the AWWA M1 manual to calculate the charge. So this method recognizes the value of connecting to the existing backup facilities in the existing domestic water system. So it recovers prior spending on infrastructure that still has reserve capacity by calculating the value of the facilities in service and then dividing by the existing capacity. So what we've done in this study is we've looked at the two components that are associated with the water system backup facility charge. One is called the dwelling unit charge, and that's what I'm going to talk about first. And then the second is the meter surcharge, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So the dwelling unit charge is made up of 5 subcomponents based on the components that make up the domestic water system. So we look at the cost of constructing wells, the cost of constructing pipelines, booster stations, reservoirs, and treatment. And we come up with the value of each of those 5 components of the domestic water system and the capacity associated with each of those 5 components. So in this study, we've looked at the costs of the water system backup facility, the costs of water system backup facilities, sorry, that's kind of a complicated sentence, but basically it's just the facilities that we've used water system backup facility charges to construct. We've looked at those over the last 20 years and then the associated capacity of the facilities. We, since the costs were varied, depending on when they were constructed, we adjusted the costs to 2021 dollars using an ENR index. And then we also allowed for a 2% escalation. And then we did depreciate the assets based on how long they've been in service. We've also included the new water demand factor that we calculated based on the 2-year meter demand study that we recently completed. And so that factor decreased from previous years, so that gets factored into the calculation as well. The water system backup facility charge, as I said, it's made up of the individual components, these 5 different components, and that gives us flexibility when we want to credit a developer for constructing a facility. And I'll get into the credits and how that works in a later slide.
Carrie, if I could just interrupt you for a moment.
Yeah.
You mentioned an ENR cost factor. If you could maybe explain what the engineering news record cost factor is.
Yeah, engineering news record, it's a standard cost escalation type factor where you look at the year that the facility was built and you look at the current year, and it's a multiplier to bring it to current value.
So engineering news record, it used to be, I guess, published by McGraw-Hill, but it is a widely distributed industry magazine periodical. It comes out monthly. They do surveys of the top engineering firms, top construction firms, top design firms. They're very well connected in the industry, and so their ability to provide something like an area cost factor is considered valuable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the result of the calculations. We have the table on the left, which is the proposed calculation and the results of that, showing a dwelling unit charge of $3,924 after depreciation. And on the right, that is the existing dwelling unit charge of $3,707 per unit. And you can see there each of the 5 components or subcomponents that I talked about. The production facilities or the wells. We have treatment, storage, boosters, and transmission mains. And you can kind of see the comparison of which ones went up, which ones went down.
Why are the quantities changing
Which?
from existing to proposed?
On the
Like the well production facilities?
the well. So so the production facility, the unit quantity, 0.81, that's our new demand per household, whereas previously it was 1 gallon per minute. So that decreased. And then, like I said, we calculated the unit cost of $717, again, using the ENR index, as compared to $555 from 2012. But then when we depreciated it, the new unit cost for the wells is $32.91, because a lot of the wells were constructed in the 2006, 2008, 2012 timeframe.
If I may just do a quick intercept. Director Estrada, are you on the line? And can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. Okay.
Good, thank you.
So I'm happy to go through each one. Do you want me to keep going?
No.
I don't get on the chart, so just take the top line, production facilities. All right, so you explained the 0.81. I guess we did a study or something that shows how much.
Yeah, the 2-year meter study.
Two-year meter study.
Looked at,
And then you have the cost, which
Right.
you just divide out, I guess, the capacity divided by the amount of demand. And then when you do the depreciation, I mean, that number drops, it doesn't seem, I don't get it, I guess.
it's
How
a,
come it drops so much?
it has to do with the calculation within the the formula, the depreciation formula. So I'd have to get into more
So
details.
it's the useful life
Useful
of that
life,
facility.
yeah.
So it's I mean, that really knocks it down.
It does. We haven't drilled very many wells recently. So like I said, most of the wells that we're looking at are 8 to 10 years old or more.
And CBWD considers those old when they're 8 to 10?
Well, what we're doing, what we're doing is we're just saying that the capacity, is mostly being used or has been used or has been paid for. So you would rather, I think, have the depreciation value, the 32, in the overall calculation versus the 580, because that keeps the overall dwelling unit charge at a reasonable rate to show that what the developers are buying into is not a brand-new system with the wells that were all drilled within the last year, but they're buying into a system with facilities that have been in service for 10, 12, 15 years. And so, most of the capacity's been accounted for, but there may still be a small amount, and then there's value that there's a redundancy in the system and a reliability in the system that they're buying into.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, so the main drivers of this, where you don't have that big drop from depreciation, is storage facilities and then especially the transmission,
Right.
which is because of the amount of investment.
Right.
Recently.
The
in
more
this?
recent investment. Yes.
All right. Interesting.
Yes.
Terry, I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry, but on the third bullet point, where you talk about proposed 21 dwelling unit charge, 1570 per unit, can you give me an example of what kind of
Yes.
project that would be and kind of how that would apply?
Yes.
Please.
So thank you for that. If you don't mind, I can move forward a couple of slides or a slide.
So I want to back up to
Okay.
the transmission mains. So
Sure.
I'm not quite sure what's driving the $900 increase in the transmission main.
Well, we have a list of transmission mains that we've used that are in the table here.
I don't think it's fair to use all of North Indio, the area out to the north where we have all the problems. I mean, that's kind of.
No, that was all used with PAYGO, or that was not used with water system backup facility charges. So we only use projects that were, where we spent water system backup facility charges.
Okay.
And that was all on, excuse me. Oh, I just knocked that off. That was all on site. That wasn't off site. So transmission mains are when they have a regional benefit and they're off site and multiple developments can tie into. So the most recent one we have is the Avenue 66 Phase 1A project, which was about $4 million.
The Avenue 66?
Yes, the one that was built as part of the county's.
Right, and so all of the
Yeah.
mains in the district have all that dewatering that we have to do on that $4 million project. I mean, that was an unusual circumstance. out there.
Actually, in that situation, there wasn't significant dewatering
You may be thinking
required.
of the sewer
You're
lines.
thinking of
Because
62
the pipeline was only installed
sewer line.
about 4 feet. So
Okay.
we worked with them on that, and the costs were very reasonable.
Okay,
And what's a unit? A unit is
A residential unit,
residential.
a single family.
A single family, okay, so we're not talking apartments.
No, when there's an apartment,
It doesn't matter how big the home is.
Right, right. In this
So
instance,
it's a 1,200 square foot house is the same as a 7,000 square foot house.
right, we're not differentiating here.
So why do you move up from 11.18 unit quantity of transmission main per unit dwelling and then go up to 15.74?
Good question.
It seems like you would go down if homes are closer together and so forth.
So the transmission main component is based on like an equivalent meter calculation. So we look at the various equivalent meters and we assign, I think, like 1 meter for every 11 feet of
Well, that's what it
transmission
used to
main,
be, and now it's up
something-
at 15, and so if you take the 15 and multiply it by the cost, then that's a driver. It seems like that's a driver in pushing the cost up.
Right, because I think we have, it depends on the amount of transmission mains have increased. So in terms of the length and the number of meters, equivalent meters, you divide the meters into the length of total transmission.
It'd be a less dense area, right? I mean,
So I
Or
can,
further to get to.
less dense, yeah, fewer meters per foot.
yeah, I can look really quick and see if, because in here, it's like 120.
It seems like if there was more homes per 40-acre piece,
Or if,
it would be
Oh, no doubt.
less compared to if you only had 40 homes on 40 acres.
and if we're allocating less water per unit because of conservation methods and ordinances and things, it seems like you'd get more units per transmission foot.
So in the 2012 study, we had 80,000 feet, and in this study, we have 121,000.
80,000 per foot of how many?
So we had a total length, 80,000, and the
You must have had more units too,
11,
about the same number of units.
yeah, it came out, 110,000
It's not that bad.
3/4 inch meters. And this one,
It kind of makes sense especially if you're looking at the East Valley, that Avenue 66 transmission main would not have a lot of connections initially, right? I mean, that's one of the problems, is that there's a lot of small water systems out there that aren't connected.
I get the fact that you're gonna, you have to, transmit that water further distance to get out to those areas. But it seems to me like the denser population would have a bigger factor in that, as well as with our new ordinances that don't allow as much water per meter, then
Right. Yeah, I think
it might be closer than this. This is about a 3.5–4% difference.
so the total meters in this study is 111,000 approximately, so, but
So 11,500, what does that mean? 11,500 meters per,
111,000 meters.
111,000 meters.
And then we divide that by the total length of transmission main to get the unit, the measure. The 15,
And before it was 80,000?
the length of pipe, yeah,
It was 80,000 meters
right.
are the lengths different?
Yes, the lengths are different.
So how
About
much of the
40,000.
So you're taking every meter in the district?
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's across the board.
Feet were done during that period of time.
Oh, I see.
It's kind of random, really.
Yeah,
It-
huh?
Well, it's a way to kind of quantify.
Yeah, you need a method, and that's the method.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to make sure Director Aguilar's question was answered.
Yes,
but
I have a couple of slides
Okay.
to further illustrate this, so,
So what that last bullet, assuming 60% outdoor usage, that's assuming 60% outdoor usage using non-potable water.
non-potable water,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
So we're looking at reducing the dwelling unit charge for a project that has dual pipes. So they would have 2 meters at the house. One would be for outdoor use using non-potable water, and then one would be for indoor use using potable water. So so they would have a reduced dwelling unit charge because the backup facilities required to serve that development aren't going to be as great. We can reduce the pipe sizes, we can reduce the storage, we can reduce the pumping requirements.
Does that happen a lot?
We
Frequently or
have
ever?
not, we have not had one yet, but we've had many proposals, and going all the way back to Cole Ranch, you know, many years ago. And then the more recent one is Section 31, the area out there in Rancho Mirage. They're planning to do.
They're planning to do that, both?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the district recognize that homes that were built before these rules did not have to pay that? That developers, I don't know when the date was it
1978.
1978. So homes that were built before 1978 didn't have to pay for this? So
my
they
house.
bought into the system and got it for free? I mean, is that taken into account at all? Is there a factor for that?
No, not that I'm aware of.
'Cause
So I'm just still trying to understand the transmission meter. So if we went up 40% from 80,000 meters to 111,000 meters, that's 40% jump.
No, I'm sorry. The meters went from like 110,000 to 111,000. So the 80,000 is the length of transmission main in the 2012 study.
Okay, so
If you,
so it's up 40% from the existing 2012 at 11 feet per meter up to 15. So it's gone up 40%. Okay. It's just awful convenient to be able to help increase that number to raise the rate for the backup system facility charge when it seems to me that if we're having ordinances that allow for less water use on an individual property, that it's counterintuitive to think that this number would go up when we're allowing less water on properties.
well, I think what it's showing is that we have
Capacity.
We have capacity, correct. We have this, we've built these large transmission mains, and we have capacity, and it's available for the developers to tie into. And so it doesn't necessarily have to do with the amount of water that you're transmitting through it, but just that they're buying into a system that has this regional capacity. And if they have to construct part of a transmission main, they get credit for it. And they don't have to pay for that part of the fee. But if you'd like, I can provide you with more details on the background on the calcs, so you can see it.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to focus in on the driver of the cost when I've always thought that the water system backup facility charge was buying into a capacity. So it looks like we might have overbuilt on the capacity. If the existing capacity is actually higher, then the fee should be lower because it's the denominator in your calculation.
Well, it would be lower if we had more than 110,000 meters. But the fact that we didn't grow, and we've kind of seen that through the general manager's report, the number of new meter installs. It's been stalled for over a decade, and it's just now beginning to increase. I mean, last year was our highest year at 800. But it doesn't stop us from building pipelines to go out and serve development.
Well, wouldn't we use more than 111,000 meters if the capacity is actually, overbuilt the capacity for 150,000 meters? Shouldn't we use that number?
Well, but those meters aren't in place, but the pipeline is. So, I mean, if you want us to make an artificial calculation, there's lots of ways to do that.
I just don't understand why the cost is going up.
It's the model that we've used, which is an accepted approach.
So I don't like the model.
I got that part.
Everybody complains about how much it costs to build affordable housing. And, I think we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so this seems like we're just adding to the problem along with everybody else. So, I mean, that's just my opinion on the thing. Everyone says, well, why can't we do it? Why can't we do it? Well, we can't do it because everybody's got these fees that are,
Yeah,
just keep going up.
But it's the first time we've looked at it since 2012, and you're talking about $218 a unit. I mean, this is not and I mean, notable that there's an opportunity here to reduce your fee if you're doing one of these projects with dual systems.
Right.
That didn't exist before. So.
No, it didn't.
But that's assuming that the fee that was enacted in 2012 wasn't already too high.
No, I understand.
One thing to keep in mind, though, as you're asking us to keep prices down on existing ratepayers, is to look at ways we can offset costs to those ratepayers by charging new development. I mean, you don't want us to be raising rates for new development that ratepayers effectively can't pay for. I mean, there's a tension here. I get it. But a lot of this new development is not, the affordable housing is not going to be infill development. It's going to be at the outer reaches of our system where the real estate costs are lower. Therefore, the need to get service out to them is going to be more expensive because we're not there. And in the East Valley, we're doing everything we can to find somebody else's money to build those systems to support those issues. But there are times when, that's not going to be possible.
Yeah, and these types of fees get included in those grants, those grant applications, so they get paid for by the grant. So, okay, is it all right?
Sure, I have a few comments.
Go ahead, Director Estrada. All right.
So I want to go back to Director Nelson's comment, which I think it makes sense. I'm trying to think through it, but I kind of caught the comment, the idea of if transmission main can take on some sort of finite capacity, and it's not the 111,000 meters, but it's a bigger number, why wouldn't we be able to use that if somehow that's tied? I kind of think there's something there. It makes sense to me. I just, I'm trying to think it through, but I just want to make sure that I thought it was a fair comment. That if the transmission main that we have built has a capacity to take on 150,000 meters or whatever that number is, that maybe that's a number we should be using.
Well, the buy-in method has a specific framework, I guess you could call it. So we are using the buy-in method because we fit into that category where we have capacity that allows developers to buy into the system. If we were a fully built out system and we didn't have the capacity, we would have to use some other type of method.
Okay, so I kind of get both of them, and maybe it's maybe the question here is, which one do we feel more comfortable with? But I also get the kind of the method that you're describing, where we've already gone, we're in front of it, we've made the expenditure, and now that's what it's cost, for us to build the infrastructure, and it requires development to now buy into it. And then I guess under that argument, are we saying that, we propose to try to update these charges, every 5 years, every 2 years, to then readjust that buy-in method or that unit cost as more units are built? But I imagine that as more units are built, there's also going to be more transmission that's built. So we have to hope that there's just an influx of a bunch of meters in one particular span of time in order for this unit quantity for transmission main to go down. Is that?
Yeah, we plan to update this regularly. At one point, we were trying to update these every 2 years. We were alternating between the water system and the sanitation capacity charge, but then it just, for numerous reasons, we stopped doing that. And then we went through and attempted to do an update in 2017-18. And then it was determined that we really needed to look at what our water demand factors were. So we did the 2-year water demand study. So here we are. So at a minimum, we will update this in 5 years, but we can do it sooner, every 3 years. The transmission mains that are in there today in 3 years or 5 years will be depreciated further. So that will make that cost go down.
Okay, so
And then I have one last comment, because I want to make sure I understand that this relationship between the water system's backup facility charge. I think you mentioned that the only projects or whether it's storage facilities, boosters, transmission mains, the only infrastructure that we're considering is infrastructure that was paid for by this water system backup facility charge. And then, I think there was a comment also made that, we're building, a transmission main in the East Valley where it is traversing maybe a lot of undeveloped land. It's creating a lot of potential for development that would eventually buy into the system. But as it relates to how those main lines or those transmission mains are being paid for, would you say that a lot of that is water system backup facilities charge, or like, for example, the transmission main on Highway 86? That was about a maybe $25-30 million project. But that wasn't. Was any component of that water system's backup facility charge? Or was
No,
it entirely...
that project wasn't included in the calc. And let me just correct on the Avenue 66 Phase 1A. Only half of the cost was, sorry, not the $4 million. $2 million was included because
so
it was 50% paid for
so it's
by WSBFC.
It doesn't seem to me that we're building a lot of transmission main out in the East Valley. I agree with Jim that a lot of what we're trying to accomplish, we are doing as much as we can to use other folks' money under the argument that it helps consolidate existing communities that are underserved. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at it. I think we're securing millions of dollars, and so a lot of that is a benefit. I would say that that's a benefit for future development as well of all sorts, because it's infrastructure that they wouldn't have to build. And so I would say that as an agency, as a district, we are doing a lot to try to bring these transmission mains into these rural areas that I think at the end of the day offset a lot of costs to developers.
Right. Yeah, we're only including the portion of the cost that was paid for by WSBFC, not if it was paid for by a loan or a grant or unrestricted reserves. Those costs are not included in the calculation.
I have just one more question.
Sure.
Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
Right. One more. There we go. So let's say the value of the facilities and service is $100. Okay, let's just say it's $100, whatever, 100% of your cost, all right? So it's $100. And so this is my thinking, the existing capacity, if we're reducing the demand, we did a demand, and so there's less demand per unit. If that goes down, right? Let's say before we did that study, the capacity was 1. So the fee would be 100 divided by 1, which is $100. But let's say the capacity, existing capacity, went up because now we have these ordinances in place. So now the capacity is 2. So the fee would be $50. The point is the fee would go down. But what I see is the fee going up, and that's where I'm having a hard time understanding. Even with you using the buy-in method, I'm still having a hard time understanding that why the fee would go up. So that's just, I guess, my understanding.
Okay, well, it has to do, as you said, you pointed out, the two main drivers are the storage and the transmission mains. And so the cost of storage has increased, you know, from 56 cents a gallon to 71 cents a gallon, and then
Storage is pretty minor.
the transmission main has significantly increased, and that's just because we've seen costs that have gone up based on the recent bids. And so it's just based on the cost to install these transmission mains.
It's not totally based on the cost, it's based on the calculations where, and we're gonna go round and round, but you've increased the feet per unit by 40%. And so the cost goes up, and then when you increase the feet per unit at 40%, that accentuates the
Right.
cost.
Right.
So that's just where I'm at.
Okay. All right. Is that okay to move on?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they're good points. Go ahead, Carrie.
Okay. So, to address Director Aguilar's question, how the water system would work, in the top example there with 100% potable water, each of the units, the residential units, would be charged the full fee, the $39.24 per unit. If for some reason, and then in the bottom example, if they are using the dual water system where they have the 2 meters at the home, then the fee per residential unit would be reduced by 40%. So they'd pay the $15.70 per unit. And then this further goes into a little more detail. We have seen different proposals. We've seen developers that have proposed public systems, non-potable water systems, and private non-potable water systems. So we tried to break out the fees so that it was clear, and this goes back to a question that Mr. Brownyard mentioned at the last meeting. So with a public non-potable water system, that would be 2 CVWD meters at the home. And so in that instance, we have the cost for the meter itself, which is $421. That's the actual material cost. So that would be the only additional charge, basically, and a charge for a backflow. And then they would just be charged the water system backup facility charge at the reduced rate. If it was a private system, then we would just forego the meter fee, the $421, because they wouldn't have a CVWD meter for the non-potable water. So that's just kind of a breakdown on how the fees would work with a dual water system. Does that help answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Any questions on that, or okay to move on? Okay. So then, this is what I talked about earlier. There is a current policy and a method in place for crediting developers if they construct a backup facility charge as part of their development. So in this example, if a developer constructs a 1,000-foot offsite pipeline that provides regional benefit. If you calculate the dwelling unit charge for those 100 units using the new fee, their total cost is $394,200. And if we look at the transmission main component of 3,052 and multiply it by 100 units, then they would be credited up to that amount, $305,200, assuming that the cost of that 1,000-foot pipeline either equals that or exceeds it. And then we would subtract that from their total fees, and they would, so they would have to build the pipeline, and then they would owe the $89,000 as their water system backup facility charge. The $89,000 would take into account the other components of the fee to cover their proportionate share of the production, the wells, the reservoir storage, any treatment, and any pumping from booster stations. Okay, so that kind of takes us to the second part of the water system backup facility charge. As I mentioned earlier, there's two components, and we just went over the dwelling unit charge, and now this is the meter surcharge. So the purpose of the meter surcharge is to collect an additional fee to pay for backup facilities needed to accommodate the increased flows through meters larger than 3/4 inch. So the one thing that's changed, though, in this study, we are proposing a waiver. So there's certain situations where a residential unit needs a 1-inch meter only to meet residential fire sprinkler requirements. And, you know, in most instances, they may never use those increased flows if they never have a fire and they never have to use those the fire sprinklers. So we're looking at, you know, still installing the 1-inch meter to make sure we can accommodate those demands if they are ever needed, but not charging for the 1-inch meter, or not charging the surcharge. So if that was, you know, something
well, no, I know we've had comment on that in the past, so that's a big new. Yeah, I mean, it's a benefit to people that kind of got caught in that requirement.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So if that, you know, sounds.
That's good.
Sounds okay, then we will continue down that path.
That's good.
Okay. Any other questions on this slide?
So when,
I have one.
Go ahead.
When I get a chance.
Go ahead.
So, have we thought about anything that that would trigger a circumstance where perhaps the development or the business or whatever the project is that perhaps was able to qualify for this waiver? Would there be a trigger where we would have another chance to reassess whether the waiver still applied? Like, for example, like under a tentative improvement, where I guess the question is this for all? Is this for just residential, or is this for commercial, industrial?
This is just for residential. Just for residential.
You don't have residential meters that are 8 inches, right?
Right. And for commercial, they typically have a fire detector check. You know, they typically have a separate fire system from their potable system.
Okay, so this just to clarify, this proposed meter surcharge waiver, we are only proposing to apply to residential meters that perhaps need some sort of fire protection component?
Well, in 2011, there was a new residential fire sprinkler requirement that went into place. And so it requires that they have a certain amount of flow and pressure for the homes that are built after that date. So this is to help with those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any any other questions on that, or, okay, this is the last slide. So just, we believe that there are benefits to this proposed 2021 water system backup facility charge. We are trying to maintain the capacity charge at a similar level to the historical rate. We are providing developers with the incentive to use non-potable water. It provides the developers the ability to tie into an existing reliable system. It continues to achieve the goal of growth paying for growth, not burdening the existing customers. We have a method in place to provide flexibility to credit developers for offsite facilities. And we've also tried to build in the flexibility to address meter surcharge concerns.
So just so I'm clear, as it sits today, somebody pays the unit dwelling, so if we change this, someone pays that unit dwelling, which is $3,700, and then they would pay on top of that a meter surcharge for a 1-inch. And currently, as it is today, everybody had to put a 1-inch meter in because everybody building homes today have to have fire sprinklers.
No, not everybody has to put in a 1-inch meter. There's just certain instances where the 3/4 doesn't work. It's not a lot of instances, but they just happen to be in a slightly lower pressure area, or the fire sprinkler, the pipeline run from the meter to where the fire sprinkler is extra long, where, you know.
So the majority of new homes today are 3/4 inch.
Yes.
So they would not pay
A surcharge, correct.
Good.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the responsiveness to some of these things that we've been hearing about for a few years now.
Sure.
Really.
Okay. All right, so.
Any idea when you might be bringing this back for action?
So here's our
Still have
schedule.
another presentation.
We still need to bring you the sanitation capacity charge, and so we're hoping to do that at the end of October. And then in December, in November, we may bring you back the offset fee if we have all of the information that you've requested. One of the items is working with the sanitation cost of service study and addressing that question on how the two fees will offset the fund. So we may not have that information in time, but if we do, we'll bring that back in November. And then December, we would like to bring back kind of maybe a final look of all 3 fees. So that's the proposed schedule right now. Just sorry for the multiple presentations. We just want to make sure we're going down the right path. So if you have any concerns, comments, questions right now, it's very helpful to hear.
One last comment.
So they're all gonna look pretty similar, all more.
Well,
So when we put them all 3 together, it's gonna be more, a lot more.
We haven't done the sanitation, I haven't seen the sanitation capacity charge yet.
We already had the presentation on the offset fee, and we gave some direction. I
Right.
don't know what you're going to do with the direction, but to see if we can model those fees, half of what was presented.
Right.
I mean, these aren't significantly higher. I mean, it's a bit of a relief to see that. And plus some of the features that provide either the waiver or the non-potable, I think is very helpful. Director Strata, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you've answered my question. I just wanted to get a sense of how we were going to move on all these. It sounds like staff is trying to give presentations on all these different components, and then hopefully bring them all back together when we've kind of gone through them. And then is the proposal to adopt them all at the same time?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then I did want to make sure, just because I kind of was having issues at the beginning here, that this presentation wasn't related to the direction from last meeting where we wanted to look at that offset calculation.
Right. This is a separate fee from the offset fee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so we're going to try to squeeze this in. I know we don't have a lot of meetings left for the calendar year because there's only one scheduled for November and one for December. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, hopefully we can get it done.
Okay.
Carrie, so to kind of summary of all my comments, I'd like to see you model the transmission main at the unit quantity of 1.18, so no increase in that, to see what it does to the rate.
So you want the rate to be the same?
No,
I'm sorry, say that again. I
I'm
didn't.
not talking about the rate being the same. I'm talking about the
No.
transmission main unit quantity, modeling it the same as what it was versus the increase of 40%.
Okay, so you want it to be at the 11.18. Okay. So it'll be the 194.
So that makes the calculation somewhat less defensible. You understand that?
Why would it be less defensive?
Because we're using a recommended methodology here from the American Water Works Association.
Well, we've got water demand studies on individual units that are going down, and
Right.
so our capacity should really be going up. So I don't care what the American Water Association, it doesn't make sense.
But so when you talk about water use,
You have more capacity when the demand from individual units goes down.
so it goes down in newer units, right? It doesn't go down in existing units.
So in newer units, right, so in the units that they want to build, the feet per unit should go down.
So when we look at the calculation, it doesn't really have anything to do with the capacity. It has to do with the number of meters and the length of the transmission mains.
And it's the production unit that has the
So all I'm going back is to your very first calculation, and I want you to model it at this, at that number. I don't see what the problem is.
we can do that. We can do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's easy to do. I get the point. I get the point on Jim too. I mean, I don't know how, I'm not sure who the injured party would be if we had a lower fee, so.
Okay, we can do
Anyways,
that.
okay. Do we have any public comment? Mr. Brown, you're.
Good morning, Mr. President and directors. First off, I've been chomping at the bit over here for a little bit. But first off, I really appreciate that you're looking at the, what I would call but-for clause within the 1-inch meter fee when we have to go up to from 3/4 inch to 1 inch because of the fire sprinkler systems. I've been chomping at the bit for that for more than 10 years. But I'm glad to see that there is something that's
Sorry, is your mic
being
on?
considered. Pardon me?
Is your mic on?
Yes. I'm just not close enough, I guess.
There, that's
All right.
better.
Now I can hear myself. Not good. What's got me riled right now is basically, I agree with Director Nelson and Estrada. What we are looking at here, go back to slide 5, you have a system that has certain components and each one has an individual capacity. By looking at your water service demand over the last couple of years, you have shown that demand has decreased significantly. And Director Nelson is absolutely correct. That adds more capacity for more homes, more dwelling units, more equivalent dwelling units. So if you actually do the math, the capacity does increase. And that's another thing I'd like to get at is I'd like to see all the backup on these individual costs and charges before we take any sort of action into adopting a fee. That's based on what you guys did between, I started looking at them in 2006 and all the way through 2012. Those components were broken out. It was determined how many equivalent dwelling units that those that capacity can serve. That is the number that you need to be looking at. What appears to me is this capacity, you're looking at the costs of the current system and dividing it by the current usage, not its capacity or ability to be used, but by its current usage. That's what appears to be in my mind, based on what Mr. Oliphant had said, but without having the backup data, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't point my finger at any particular spot. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So getting back, do we have any other public comment? I just want to try to understand. I mean, so Director Nelson's asking to model that transmission main component at the 11.18 unit quantity instead of the 15.74. Is there a different number that might be more relevant? I mean, the 11.18 was based on data from a long time ago. Can we try to maybe model it on something more relevant to today's numbers that takes into account a capacity number? I mean, I don't know what that number is. You know, if it's the number of meters, if this calculation of 15.74 is 110,000 meters or whatever the number is, maybe the real capacity is 130 or 140,000. Wouldn't that be I mean, I don't know where
That would be fine because, you know, Carrie's right. I mean, the transmission main, the price, when you look at that formula, the price is going up on the numerator. But what we're doing with this formula is we're lowering the capacity.
Yeah.
In relation to, well, we're lowering the capacity. When the capacity should go up.
Yeah. Because of.
You know, these comments. So it should be going.
I get it. I get the argument. I'm just thinking rather than anchoring it to the 11.18, which is an old number based on old data.
Yeah,
why not find a new number that's based on current, on existing capacity?
That'd be helpful, Joe.
I know.
I think that makes more sense to me that there's, you know, we're building more transmission main and they could sustain so many meters, and it's not going to be 111. It's going to be more than that.
It takes into account unused capacity that's already been built, right? Yeah.
I understand. Okay.
Well, I'm just curious, in pursuing this new model, how would you even calculate what the new capacity would be? I'm just curious, before you come back with a number, what would be the factors that you would consider in developing that new number for capacity?
To be honest, I need to think about this. I don't want to just give you
Okay,
an
well, it's
answer
a lot
off
to
the
think
top
about.
of my head, okay? I need to go back and I need to look at it and think about it.
Okay.
So.
Well, you could always add 15.74 to 11.18 and divide by 2.
No, we want to use current numbers. I'm just
I need
thinking,
to look at it.
because if we change our method, we're not going to be anchored to that 11.18 forever. So we should come up with something that's more based on more current numbers. Nice try, though.
Hey, I appreciate the support.
Makes it easy.
Okay, thank you very much.
You know, it seems to me if it's tied to real numbers,
Yes.
it's defensible.
Right.
It's just a different method.
Right.
But I think it's a more relevant method. I agree with the thinking on that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Look forward to your part 3 coming up on the other charge, SCC. Climate change, right? Am I remembering this right? Our next thing.
Budget.
Oh, the budget. Oh, my favorite.
We're just, yeah, it's just, are we talking about 8C? It's just-
Yeah, I was jumping ahead. 8C is receive and file Coachella Valley Water District fiscal 2021 budget versus actual for quarter ending June 30th, which was also our year ending date. And, you know, I got a little bit of heartburn on this one. Jeff, so, I mean, the only comment I put on there was 3 letters starting with a W and ending with an F. But I won't tell you what the middle one is. So it may be a T, I don't know. So we had this massive budget variance, right? $40 million-ish. But it was favorable, which is great. So I guess good news is we had a favorable variance. The bad news is it was huge. And am I looking at it wrong?
It's 15.7.
Well, first of all,
I thought I saw a bigger number than 15 million.
good morning, President Powell.
And here's my question. And how much of this variance was taken into account when we constructed our newly adopted budget? I mean, that's really my
Yeah,
question.
that is fair. So a couple of points. First of all, if you look at the ending reserve number, look at the beginning balance number. So
Where are we?
What page?
if you look at the all funds summary numbers,
On page.
page 7,
If you
you're just
tell the
looking at
page, I can
revenues.
have Yolanda pull up the attachment from the website, page 7.
if you look at page 7.
Right.
So of the $37 million
On the sign number.
more favorable ending balance, 12 of that is related to the prior year, the beginning balance of 12.
Right. So it's a $37 million variance.
So when you look at the budget, the differences of projected actuals versus budget, when we set the budget, we ended up coming out $12 million better off the previous year. So right off the bat, your beginning balance estimate was low by 12.
Right.
So that accounts for 12 of the 37 million.
No, isn't it 12 of the 48 or 49?
Well, I'm looking at the ending reserve
Yeah.
numbers.
So the ending reserve is 37 million higher than what we projected.
Right. And what I'm saying is that 12 of that is related to the beginning balance
Oh, okay.
being understated from the
Well,
prior.
well, and
year.
we're going to have the same problem this year, aren't we?
Yeah, yes. That'll always be this.
So like I said, I mean, favorable is good. But how much of this
So,
variant, I mean, I'm used to 10, $12 million. I mean, that's kind of what we've seen, what I remember seeing. I don't remember seeing 37 million variance.
so a number of these things, to answer your question though, were already anticipated in the cost of service study. And then a number of the items are also timing differences on recognition of revenues and expenses. So for example, this whole CIP program, you have about 7.4 million of savings. It's really a timing difference. We're going to be spending that money in the new year. There are obviously real savings in the area of employee expenses. We saved about $1 million more than we had budgeted, that kind of thing.
The real number is 15.
Oh,
But with the water,
Basically in domestic
yes,
water,
and
which you know where I'm going to,
yes.
which is going to help us when we talk about rates for next year.
As I have
will.
been saying, every
for sure.
single year we come back for a next year's worth of Prop 18 approved rate increases. We're going to be revalidating the need for that rate increase.
I mean, I see the domestic water sales portion of it, because it was really hard to forecast with COVID what was going to happen. I mean, you know, did we see this tourism thing rebound so quickly and go even better than, I mean, it's really kind of quite crazy. So that's showing up in these numbers that, I get that.
So I'm not sure I'm following here. You seem to be adding instead of subtracting. So the page 7 near the bottom, the beginning reserve, we budgeted 353 million, right? That's what we thought it was going to be when we created the budget, right? It turns out that it was lower than that, right? The actual beginning reserve was 342, so it was lower by almost 12 million. Am I right?
No, you're right. I'm
So now you have this massive increase in cash flow of $49 million favorable variance, right? So your ending reserve is better than what you budgeted by 37 million. So the difference is actually 49 million. The error, am I right? The miscalculation was 49 million. And 12 of that was the beginning reserve, which you thought was going to be higher than what it actually was. So not only did you cover that $12 million error, but you had another $35 million favorable variance on top of that. So it's a 48 million. So I stand by my number. And that's why I looked at this and go, how did we miss it? I know, Carrie, I'll let you talk. How did we miss this thing by $49 million? That's where I am.
Yeah, so if I could jump in. So as it shows line by line on page 6, part of it is when we budgeted this, we probably anticipated a bit lower sales. You could see on the sales itself, came in higher, the property tax came in higher. One of the biggest contributor to this excess is because our water purchases, there's 15 million right there that we did not anticipate to use. I mean, we anticipated to use, but we ended up not using. So we didn't spend that 15 million. The purchases, right? And on top of that, you can take a look at our salaries is a lot lower than we anticipated, but it's not because we didn't need those funds to be budgeted, but because of the COVID, of course, with everything closing, our recruitment, are kind of slowed down. So part of that is contributing to us not having a full staff, not being able to get people in. So our labor is a lot lower than what we normally have. So that's a huge contributor as well, at $5.5 million, including some of our regular maintenance, because with half the year pretty much shutting down last year, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to, we're supposed to do, whether it's maintenance, whether it's filling up our open recruitment, and even our projects itself. If you look at the capital improvement project, we are down $7.4 million. Again, construction slows down. So I think it's kind of like an odd year last year, maybe this fiscal year, which is partly because of the pandemic. So I'm anticipating it to kind of get back to where we are as things are opening up, as we're progressing to construct and go through our construction projects.
Yeah. Carrie, thank you. That's a good answer. That's the answer I was looking for. I mean, I think that when you produce an information item for us that has this large of a variance, there should be some staff effort to say, here's what happened. I mean, I know it's all explained in there, but we could have just passed right over this thing. We wouldn't even know. So out of the $48 million variance, 49, how much of that was taken into account when we constructed our current year approved budgets?
Well, turn on my bike. We did go ahead, we did adopt it in May, so we were using current data at that point. We were looking at our current year budget, so it is accounted for.
So I guess if we roll back the tape to May, how much of a budget variance did we think we had when we in May, right? How much of that did we know about in May?
I don't have the exact figures, but it's close to this number, and I can hit that number.
Was it? God, I don't remember it being that big. Okay.
It was, yeah, because we would project out, because by that time, we've had about a good 8 to 9 months of data, and we just projected out the last 3 months. If there is a variance, it would have been the water purchase, but I don't think it's that significant. At that point, we already knew that we were going to be under budget. When we were constructing
Could
it.
you go back and get that answer?
I can.
So basically, how much variance did we incorporate into how much of this variance did we incorporate into the newly constructed and adopted budget?
I will get that back to you. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, and it's good news to have a favorable variance. I mean, I'm it's great, but we're using that as a foundation for assumptions on setting rates. Or, I mean, it's not just setting rates anymore. I mean, I think we've become, a little more hawkish on capital improvements too, because we feel like we don't have an unlimited amount of money to spend. So we might cancel or delay projects based on these assumptions. Okay, thank you.
Just have one minor question. Just curious, really more than anything else, but I noticed in your report that our legal expenses, and maybe Jeff or someone else can answer this, was almost $700,000 under budget. And that surprised me given the load of litigation that we have on our plate. So why is that? Why are we $700,000 under budget?
Yeah, I think I could probably respond to that. There are a number, at least 24 lawsuits that we're following, but it has to do with the timing of how litigation actually proceeds through the courts, and the courts have been closed. And so there's still a lot of back and forth between counsel and opposing counsel on demurrers. And, we had cases we thought we would be arguing on the merits that actually went up to appeal. And so then we're still looking at the technicality of the law. We are engaged in mediation, extended mediation on one of the lawsuits, which the board is aware of, that could have gone back into litigation. So the big costs are when we actually go to court and prepare to litigate. We just haven't got to that point where we're taking those cases to court for litigation.
Okay, so these numbers will just be absorbed into the new budget then, pretty much?
Unless we find some way to dispatch the lawsuits, but at this point, we're still working through, the technicalities. And at least in 6 of the lawsuits, we've got a new complainant now since the last complainant. And so those are all being re-looked at by the new complainant on how they want to resubmit. And in at least 2 of the cases, they have made resubmittals. So again, our guys have to kind of take a look at that, build it up, and then make demurrers. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It is a tough one to project, though, I will say.
It is. Anything else before we take action on this item? Is there a motion to receive and file on 8CI?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Okay. Roll call, please.
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Aye.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. 9A. Oh, here we go. I was so excited about this, I wanted to jump the gun. Adopt the 2021 CBWD Climate Action and Adaptation Plan and approve resolution presented by William Patterson. Floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning. We have Erica Lennard from Rincon Consultants who's going to provide a presentation.
Let me just make sure she's on the line. Erica, are you on the line still?
Good morning. Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. Okay.
Great. So this presentation and the CAP, Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, is a culmination of 12 months of development. That was part of our strategic plan initiative for water quality and environmental leadership. And we've also, worked with some other CVWD staff to get this information and develop a baseline and forecast of greenhouse gas emissions for CVWD and put measures in place. I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Erica. She's got a really in-depth presentation on this document.
Great, thank you. Good morning, I'm Erica
Morning.
Lennard from Rincon Consultants. I'm pretty excited to be here this morning. Next slide, please. As William was saying, this is a strategic initiative from 2021 with the primary objective being to improve scoring on the grant and loan funding applications, as well as to identify some climate adaptation measures that can be implemented. Next slide. So really the primary purpose of this Climate Action Adaptation Plan, or CAP, is to improve CVWD's competitiveness for state and federal funding opportunities. Some state and federal funding opportunities are prioritizing projects or applications from agencies that have a CAP or climate action policies, like the State Water Revolving Fund, which do provide secondary scoring opportunities for those that have a climate action plan adopted. So with this plan and adopting that, that can help increase competitiveness to gain those funds. The plan also prepares CVWD for anticipated legislative changes that could affect water agencies. Just want to note here that at this time, CVWD is not beholden to many of the state climate change legislation and doesn't really face legislative requirements to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. However, the state does recognize that water agencies are one of the larger contributors to greenhouse gas emissions from electricity use and energy use. So it is anticipated that as California continues to work towards that 2045 carbon neutrality goal, that additional legislation and regulations will likely be established in the future that could require CVWD to adopt low carbon practices or operations. So this is just getting kind of ahead of that and starting to prepare in advance. Additionally, the plan does support and build off of CVWD's existing long-range planning efforts and projects, particularly those that have CIP funding that have already been considered. And the plan does identify some voluntary measures that CVWD can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from current operations. Next slide, please. Again, there's several benefits with the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, but one of the primary ones being is increasing competitiveness for those state and federal funding opportunities. Other benefits that come along with this plan and the greenhouse gas reduction measures that are within it can help improve energy efficiency, which can also lead to cost savings, as well as just improving resiliency and supporting CVWD's environmental leadership initiatives. Next slide. The CAP is made up of 4 primary components, which include the establishment of the baseline inventory of current greenhouse gas emissions generated from operations, and then forecasting out what the future greenhouse gas emissions may look like based off of anticipated growth and future projects, and then establishing a greenhouse gas reduction goal that aligns with the state, and finally, identifying some voluntary greenhouse gas emission reduction measures and climate adaptation measures that improve resiliency in the face of climate change. Next slide, please. This is kind of a quick recap of what was presented back in April. So a majority of CVWD's greenhouse gas emissions are due to electricity use. This makes up about 51% of current greenhouse gas emissions, with scope 1 from fleet emissions, combustion of fuel in the buildings, as well as wastewater treatment emissions, making up about 38% of emissions. Emissions are anticipated to increase from where we are now to 2025, which is primarily due just from increases in services and associated operations. But you'll notice here that even though electricity increases are anticipated with that operational increase, electricity emissions will actually begin to decline kind of from 2025 and beyond, which is just due to the California Renewable Portfolio Program and Senate Bill 100 that's driving electricity to be carbon neutral by 2045. But with the emissions from electricity going down, emissions that are associated with things like the wastewater treatment processing will become a more significant portion of CVWD's greenhouse gas emission profile. But this is a statewide issue, and we anticipate that between technology, legislation, and opportunities that'll kind of come along with that, to be able to help water districts to be able to address greenhouse gas emissions from wastewater treatment will become more available over time. So a lot of this cap, you'll probably have noticed, focused primarily on electricity in the short term, with planning measures looking towards the long term for the wastewater treatment emissions. Next slide, please. The CAP's greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy was developed specifically to follow kind of the criteria for scoring of these grant applications. And this is to maximize the ability of CVWD to improve their competitiveness with these applications and funding opportunities. Further, the measures that are proposed in the greenhouse gas reduction strategy were selected based on their consistency with current CVWD programs and initiatives that are already in place or have CIP funding that has already been considered to limit costs. We do understand that measures need to be cost effective, or really better yet, cost savings. So anything that had high capital costs that wouldn't result in future cost savings were not considered in this strategy. So to meet these criteria that are listed out here, the CAP does establish a goal that aligns with the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals and other state climate change plans. It identifies measures that, with implementation, would result in actual greenhouse gas emission reductions, which do include alternative sources of energy and on-site renewables. And the potential of greenhouse gas emission reductions with implementation were quantified, and an implementation schedule was identified. Next slide, please. In order to be consistent with state legislation, CVWD's greenhouse gas reduction goal is 40% below 1990 levels. This keeps CVWD aligned with state goals, which is something that the grant funding programs are looking for. But again, CVWD is not beholden to the state goals. This is setting CVWD up to be prepared for anticipated state legislative changes that could impact CVWD. And as this is CVWD's first climate action plan, the greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy focuses on voluntary actions and measures that can take place in the next 5 to 10 years to put them on a good pathway to align with the state's goals. As technology changes, new legislation is passed, more funding comes available. We anticipate that these measures and actions would need to be updated over time to kind of reflect changes and highlight new opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay. So the greenhouse gas reduction goals, how they were quantified, is really to cover the amount of emissions that would be between the target that CVWD has established and the forecasted emissions with the state legislation that's already in place, like that SB 100 that is associated with lowering emissions from electricity. So that kind of yellow area is what we're aiming to reduce, and that's our gap. Next slide, please. The series of measures that were developed with the Environmental Department. The strategy is focused on those measures that CVWD would be required to comply with, which are not many. It's really just the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. And then the rest of the reduction strategy is built out of voluntary measures that would help CVWD to achieve the greatest amount of emission reductions while still being cost effective. This includes things such as energy reduction projects, things that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also generate that cost savings. The measures were also set up to align and build off of other long-range plans and projects, such as upgrades that may be occurring with the wastewater or water reclamation plants that is in the sanitation master plan to kind of help double down on benefits of CIP funding that is already being considered. The CVWD's primary generation of emissions right now is associated with electricity use. For the state of California, that water energy nexus is a large concern, and that is the primary source of emissions that CVWD is generating right now. So there's a lot of focus on measures that kind of can tackle that. Opting into things like carbon-free electricity programs can help accelerate CVWD's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, while energy efficiency can both reduce greenhouse gas emissions from electricity, but also generate cost savings. And one thing I just want to point out here before we move on, this strategy is voluntary. So these measures and actions that are here are presenting a roadmap of ways that CVWD can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but beyond the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, there's not a penalty for not meeting full implementation. And this is just aligning CVWD with the criteria that improve their competitiveness for that funding and loan opportunities. Next slide, please. So here we have a summary of the primary measures. Each of these measures are supported by a series of different actions that help with the measure coming to fruition. So the CAP quantifies these potential greenhouse gas emissions that could be achieved with implementation of the various different measures and actions.
If we all leave the room, she'll notice.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. One of our board members had a question. We just had our mics on. I apologize for that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Director Aguilar. With respect to the previous slide, if you can go back one slide. Regarding the green electricity options through Southern California Edison, are we currently participating in any of those programs, or are we evaluating participation in any of those programs currently?
My understanding is that, and at the time of preparing this, that CVWD is not currently involved in these programs. There are a couple different options that are available to CVWD, and what's built into the plan is to, I believe that there's already been some research going into what it would look like to join these plans and to what extent. Because there's with SCE, there's also with IID, and then there's a number of different kind of other community plans that are outside of the traditional SCE or IID, like a power purchase agreement that can have some cost benefits.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I just wanted to follow up too while we're breaking here. This Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, I did have a question on that, and I'm trying to understand, I guess. It sounds potentially expensive. Is that's a state requirement, and how soon do we need to do? I mean, do we have? I guess we have some Tier 4 diesel probably in the mix, but is that even allowed? I mean, what's the? We're going to be buying electric vehicles. What does this mean? Because I notice it's in the resolution.
Yes. So the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, it's requiring fleets to start moving towards and prioritizing the purchase of zero-emission vehicles, so whether that's electric or hydrogen, anything to start lowering the emissions there. It does have a long time span of when things need to be implemented, and it's kind of a rollout. The goal is to have fleets be zero emissions by 2045, but really the way that it's set up is that as new vehicles need to be purchased, the zero-emission vehicles are required to be prioritized. But what has been discussed and what is currently included in the plan is that there is a drop-in renewable diesel fuel that's already been identified that would not increase costs, that can already start to lower emissions from the fleet.
So it's a different kind of diesel fuel? Is that what I'm hearing?
So if I can just interject for a moment. We, in our fiscal year 22 capital improvement budget, we have 12 medium-duty vehicles scheduled for replacement. AQMD is requested in accordance with the transfer over to CNG and other types of alternative fuels to submit applications to be able to do that. We are struggling through those, to say the least. We took 4 medium-duty vehicles and we brought them back down to gas, which are 552-ton vehicles, which has helped. But out of the 12, they are trying to get us to go to CNG on a lot of them. We are working through the process to try to say the logistics don't work. For example, if I'm sending a vehicle 2 hours south, I'm not going to Palm Desert to fill up a CNG vehicle. We're also working through horsepower requirements. There's a difference. The threshold is 400 horsepower for medium duty, and there are applications that we need more torque and more horsepower to do our jobs. So of the 12 that we have this year, long story longer, 6 of them we're working through. We just had a conference call last week. We think we can definitely thread the needle there, but it is getting more and more difficult to be able to buy any diesel whatsoever. And we've looked at alternatives for diesel. There are packages that you can buy, and they are slowly going by the wayside.
So Tier 4 diesel, which was pushed by CARB, right, with lots of incentives, that's not going to work.
That's not.
That's out now.
No, no. CARB and AQMD aren't completely aligned in that.
Yeah, apparently not. So, so I'll tell you my thinking on this is electric is going to be the way to go, and this transition from into the different kinds of diesel or different kinds of CNG or whatever it is, that's temporary. I mean, you're going to get the torque and the horsepower and the range and everything from electric. And less maintenance. We can shut our maintenance shop down if you go all electric.
Yeah, there are electric vehicles now that have 1,000 horsepower. I don't think they have anything in medium or heavy duty necessarily yet.
No, it's going to be 5 years, but it'll happen, and it's going to happen fast.
And we're trying to just thread the needle to buy what is necessary now, and anything that we can postpone and work our way through and extend the useful life, we're trying to. So, yeah. But there's definitely a transition there. And we had the alternative fuel study. We didn't get through that. So I do agree within the next 5 years it will all be electric on medium duty for sure. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to very soon reach the point where you bought your last gas pickup.
Yes, thanks.
Couple years. All right, sorry about the interruption, but go ahead.
Oh, no worries. We'll dive back in here. Great, thank you. So here is a summary of the quantified potential greenhouse gas emission reductions with implementation of these different measures that are laid out. As you can see, there's the potential to reduce emissions by about 10,000 metric tons carbon or CO2 equivalents by 2030. Although the measures and the actions that are identified at this point do not fully close that gap between the forecasted emissions and the current greenhouse gas emission targets, implementation of these measures sets up CVWD to have really significant progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and provides a really strong foundation for aligning with state goals, as well as weaved within these actions and measures is improving resiliency of CVWD's facilities and getting set up for some of those legislative changes that are occurring, like that advanced clean fleet rule we were just talking about. And since this is CVWD's first cap, it's a lot about setting the stage for future efforts. As technology advances and as more and more grant funding and starts to come online, since the state is pushing hard to reach our 2045 carbon neutrality goals, there's a lot of opportunities that will be continuing to come online. So we imagine that this cap will need some updating over time to kind of adjust with those new opportunities and realign. Okay, next slide, please. So since this is a climate action and adaptation plan, we looked at areas where measures could be adaptive and improve CVWD's resiliency in addition to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So CVWD is particularly vulnerable to reduced availability of imported water, reduced water quality, increased flooding and fire events that could affect infrastructure, as well as particularly being vulnerable to electricity supply shortages and increases in electricity cost. So the measures that focus on things like water conservation, on-site renewable energy, energy efficiency projects, these are all multi-beneficial that help improve resiliency regardless of climate change, can reduce costs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but do improve adaptation for kind of this changing environment we're in. And let's see. And I think with that, we can move on to the last slide. And I can open this up for questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Already asked my question. Any other? Thank you very much. Okay, so is this is an action item, so we need a motion to adopt this app.
I'll make a motion to adopt the item.
And approve the resolution.
Or it's approving the resolution, which in turn adopts the plan.
Yeah. I believe that's what he said.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Was that I'll second it. If I didn't hear, did I hear a second? I don't know if I did. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Thank you. President Powell?
Aye.
Vice President Estrada?
Aye.
Director Bianco?
Aye.
Director Aguilar?
Aye.
And Director Nelson?
Aye.
Thank you.
That passed 5-0. Thanks, William.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. Thanks, Erica.
9B
Thank you.
is our reimbursement resolution. Carrie?
Good morning. So I don't have a presentation, but this is just to get us ready in preparation for alternative financing options that we're working on for the stormwater and potentially domestic funds as well. So this is just to kind of get us the reimbursement resolution prepared already, so when we're in time for us to go through the alternative financing, whether it's a bond issuance or a public note, we have this in place. That would allow us to get reimbursement for costs that we're already incurring as of today.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
I don't. Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
President Powell?
Aye.
Vice President Estrada?
Aye.
Director Bianco?
Aye.
Director Aguilar?
Aye.
And Director Nelson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Carrie.
We have other Carrie.
Madison Club Connection. I know you guys are killing it today. The Carries.
Yes, I am.
Madison Club Connection. Go
Okay,
ahead.
yes, this is to request authorization to solicit bids for the construction of the Madison Club Avenue 54 meter connection project. So in February, a task order was approved to have Krieger and Stewart prepare the plans and specs. And this connection will allow Madison Club to start using Colorado River water. I don't know if you need any more additional information on this. I can provide more as necessary.
I didn't see where the funds were coming from. Where would the funds
Oh,
come
they're
from?
in the
Did I miss
East
it?
replenishment fund. They're budgeted in the East. We have 800,000. And we believe that we will be within that budget.
Yeah, it is.
Or lower.
So, I'm sorry, it comes from which fund?
East replenishment.
The East Rag?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, East replenishment, got it, thanks. I missed it.
That's okay. Any other questions on this one? It's about 375 feet, 12-inch diameter PVC pipe.
Thank you, Carrie. Do we have a motion to approve this?
I'll move approval.
Second.
In a second. Any other discussion? Then let's do a roll call.
President Powell?
Aye.
Vice President Estrada?
Aye.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I vote.
Thanks, Gary.
You know, on 9D, I am going to exercise a bit of caution as a neighboring property owner and recuse on this item, so I'll be out the door. And I'll hand the gavel to Director Stott. Are you okay running it from there?
Yeah, I could do it.
Okay, let me get out.
And then as soon as President Powell steps out, Dan, you can start.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Good morning. So I'm here this morning to request authorization to solicit bids for the demolition of the elevated storage tank at our Coachella campus. This structure has been here for about 76 years, constructed in the mid-1940s. It's been taken offline as of July of this year when we tied into the city of Coachella's water system. We had a structural and seismic analysis of this tank completed about in November of last year. And not surprisingly, it found that this tank is undergoing minor to severe corrosion on many of the structural elements on the steel plating. The paint system has completely failed. And so as a result, staff is recommending that we go out and demolish this tank. It doesn't meet any current seismic codes. The cost to rehabilitate this tank is probably higher by a factor of 3. We're estimating that the demolition and removal of this tank is going to be roughly around $200,000, which is budgeted in our operating budget. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I thought that we were just going to leave that there and that we were going to allow the city of Coachella to paint it, that they wanted to paint it and put some kind of either Coachella on it or
We've had those.
I know, they don't want the liability.
Yes, so
they don't want
We've Director Bianco, we've had those conversations with city staff on those 2-on-2 meetings that we have, and at the last meeting that we had with them, I think it was agreed that that as it relates to a potential mural, that their money could be better spent perhaps in trying to work on a mural that tells the story, the history of CVWD on the wall that was just built, the block wall, versus making any sort of investment that would be needed to keep the tower. And then I think Jim, you shared that at least the sense of what that cost would be for the seismic retrofit or anything that would need to take place for that tower to remain in place. So I think that's been kind of fleshed out. Is that your sense, Jim?
Yes, sir. That's my recollection. We did hold for a while for the city to kind of evaluate whether or not they wanted to move, either keep the tower where it was or relocate it somewhere else. And the costs, as you've already described, were a little bit more than they thought they wanted to pay. And we are open to the idea of a mural. City council members were going to reach out to the community to see if they could find somebody, and then we'd of course want to evaluate. Katie has volunteered to be part of whatever group committee that would be to represent us, but it appears that we'd have to come back to the board, but I think it's fine in concept.
I love that idea of a mural, and if we could maybe incorporate that into like a pre-paint of some future building necessity to pay into some kind of fund. If we could, put the mural out there and then say, hey, well, this is our prepayment into our Art and Public Places funds. I think that would be a great idea.
I'd have to check. I'm not sure. I know we had that issue when we built here.
Right.
But I don't know that Coachella has an Art and Public Places requirement. They do. Okay.
It's the largest in the valley.
Spoken like someone who's paid that. I will not refute that.
It's a great idea.
All right. Any other questions?
I would just like, just a note on the agenda. You know, we've been talking today, the removal of the tower. When you list the item in the agenda as approve and authorize the solicitation of bids for the demolition of a Coachella campus reservoir, that tells me nothing that this is the tower. And I think that we should be upfront with those kinds of things. I think it's trying to hide the ball from the community. I mean, there were a number of community members that were very interested in the tower. It sounds like, though, that through the city council and CVWD that's been worked through. But I would just like to be more transparent on agenda items, please.
Okay.
I know it's a reservoir, but it's the tower. So, I mean, even John built a little, even at the, when we did our days at the Living Desert, we had a special tower there, right? So that's our new tower, the miniature tower. But, you know, it's an icon in the area, and I just thought it deserved, apparently it's had some discussion, so it's not a big deal, but as far as agenda items, I'd just like to see more clarity, please.
I would leave it there and not do anything with it, but you guys are gonna fight me on that.
It is a liability.
Yeah, we did look at that, and that's why we had the structural
They're-
encroachment report.
They're all over the United States, these towers, right? And they're much older than that one. I mean, there'd be an earthquake, that building would go down before that tower, I bet, but I'm not gonna.
I tend to agree with you.
I mean, the tower's not going down. But I get that there's new rules and regulations for things like this now, and the 200,000 seems like a lot, but in 25 years, someone will say, we have to take that tower down, and it may cost $1 million then. Right? Right. I mean, that's what
You're right.
I mean, someone will say, you have to.
Yeah, because we're not gonna spend money to fix it, right?
We're not gonna spend money to fix it.
Well, are we? I mean, I think that's the question. I think I was fighting for the tower for the past 2 years. I think it's iconic, as you said, and even if we made use for it by putting a big CV, that CV logo on it, I mean, I don't know if it's in the right place where it would, that I've come to question some of that, whether it's in the right place for visibility, whether it's just iconic in itself, where we, can keep it and use it. And then hearing the cost factors associated with that, is that something that we're willing to is it that valuable that we're willing to spend that money to keep it? I don't know. I guess I'm with the majority of the board, but I do like the tower. I think it's a unique, a landmark, and it kind of, I feel a little bit sad that it's going to go down.
Yeah, me too. And I remember hearing the quote on the painting of it. The painting of it was almost expensive as the removal of it. So, I'm conflicted too. I mean, it's
You'd think you'd get somebody for free who would want to do that, and a Coachella resident that wants to put, something and sign his name to it, you'd think.
So just to give the board some more information in the report that was prepared. Some of the structural elements like the bolts and nuts, they're corroded, they're rusting. Some of the tension rods would have to be replaced. And so, there is an option and a cost to keeping it in place. The engineer's estimate, depending on what you did, range from probably $600,000 to over $1 million just to bring it back up to code and fix the corrosion, repaint it without a mural. So
is it cheaper to build one from scratch?
Well, that's the decision point. You could take that money and do something elsewhere, perhaps. And I'm not here to obviously tell the board what to do, just giving you the information that I've seen, so that you can consider that.
I
The
would
same-
make a strong recommendation.
It's the same.
You know what I'm gonna
Is
say.
the same company that says it's corroded is the one that's taking it down?
No.
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 Okay, let's move.
Mr.
All right,
Chairman,
well, is there
I'll move approval of the item, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Vice President Estrada,
Aye.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson.
Aye.
Okay, 4-0. If we can,
Okay.
Thank you.
is he coming?
Thanks, Dan. We told him to move it to your place.
It's already there.
Okay.
Good morning, President Powell, members of the Board of Directors. I'm Alex, the Assistant Director of Engineering Services and Planning. This item I'm bringing here for you is to authorize negotiations to begin for sewer flow transfer agreement negotiations with the Valley Sanitary District for the stormwater development. Would the board like a presentation? I have a presentation ready. I'm also available to answer any questions if you'd like to skip the presentation.
Thank you. I mean, this project is something that's way in the future, right? I mean,
It's very way in the future. This would just wanted to make sure we didn't get into any negotiations with Valley Sanitary without soliciting input from the board. We would
No,
come
I
back
mean,
at a later time with
it seems
terms.
reasonable to me. So in order to avoid the LAFCO process, we can just talk directly with Valley San and divide the responsibilities.
Correct, sir.
That's the deal. I mean, that's fine with me.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Where is, I'm looking at the map, I just want to make sure is it the,
It's up above the dump,
okay, I see it.
right? Am I saying that right?
So it's kind of northeast of the Interstate 10, SR 86 interchange there. It's block in yellow
Above the canal,
above the canal, yes.
Way up there.
it's above the dump.
Above the dump. The
No,
dump's that
I
kind of
have,
orange thing there.
Dump's the orange right there.
So I have, let me just ask this.
Go ahead.
Is the city of Indio, planning to annex, that area, or is that already within their Indio's, sphere of influence? Is that, within Valley Sanitation District's, service area? I'm trying to get a sense of this because I know that LAFCO right now is working with various cities here in the Coachella Valley, including La Quinta, Indio, the city of Coachella, and they're negotiating these different spheres or different areas of sphere of influence. I know there's some talks between the city of Coachella and Indio for a portion on Jackson. And I'm just wondering, to the extent that all those conversations are being had,
Yes.
to your knowledge, does it involve, is it simply a negotiation between CVWD, Valley San, City of Indio, or does it need to include perhaps the other surrounding service agencies like the City of Coachella, who also kind of butts up against that area there with their sewer service?
So the project is in the sphere of influence of the city of Indio. It is within the Indio Water Authority's domestic water boundary, but not within Valley Sanitary's service area or their sphere of influence. This map that shows up there, the Valley Sanitary sphere of influence is shown in the black block there.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we have a motion and a second because I heard it. Did you get that
Yes.
recorded? Yeah, okay.
Director Bianco made the motion and Director Nelson made the second, excuse me.
Okay. Any other discussion? Then thanks, Elmer, for the brief presentation.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah, that was handled really well. Roll call, please.
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Aye.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar?
Aye.
And Director Nelson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Passed 5-0.
And just for the record, Elmer, was this your first presentation to the board?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Wow. You're batting 1,000.
But I am reminded that at least one of the board members has asked us to move quickly through the presentations if at all possible, so.
No, that was,
The better we are.
that was awesome. All right, so board member general comments, Director Nelson.
Yeah, I have a couple comments. So I was approached by a couple different growers over the last couple of weeks. One who is having an opportunity to either take water or not take water, and I guess the nature of why they're not going to take Colorado River water and help support the underrun on the river is that, and it's a small piece of property, but I guess it has to do with an air gap situation where they want to do a check valve or a double check valve or backflow preventer, and with the district has a requirement for an air gap for those kinds of situations. So they're up along 74, I think, and somewhere up there. And I get the nature of the objection to, or the objective of the air gap, quagga mussel control, very important. No cross-contamination from water sources and fertilizers, kinds of things. But there's also really strident opposition and preferences by CVWD staff, and an unwillingness to be customer orientated to do something that's might be a one-off, but makes perfect sense. And so that's troubling to me. The other thing is I think the district is thinking that as a result of the check valve, there would be an ability for that customer to use CVWD's reservoir as its own capacity, which in fact would have no effect on CVWD's operations at all. And so that's also troubling that we're not being that customer oriented to that. I gave this some thought, and some local companies are able to certify backflow preventers and check valves, and that could be put all on the customer to do that if that's what the customer wants to do. And it's just a shame that CVWD is willing to lose out on selling some underrun capacity there because of some just let's do things the way that we've always done.
Director Nelson, if I may, if you'd like, the staff, I'm sure, is following board set policy. If you'd like us to bring the issue to the board for a reconsideration of policy, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, then I guess I am with my comments here today.
Yeah.
Very well.
We'll need a little more, when it comes back, we'll need a little more information.
We would set it up as if, it's any other item that staff is briefing.
Right.
We'll explain the policy and we'll explain the difficulties. And, apparently if someone has an alternate they want to propose, I'm sure staff could provide that information as well. But we
I'll get
can't,
that.
our job is to follow policy,
Yeah.
regardless of how irritating that might be.
Well,
Happy to take a look at it.
yeah, very good. So the other thing is I appreciate Dan Charlton's communication. There was a customer along Fred Waring that was having some difficulties around the canal, and I was able to talk to him about CVWD and walked away a very happy customer and appreciated that someone took some greater interest in him. And so that went well. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Aguilar?
No comments this morning.
Director Bianco?
No, but I'll piggyback on that. I mean, that's happened more than once, and maybe I haven't thanked staff enough, but the staff really does a good job of helping out individual customers when they have problems that they feel like that no one will listen to. So I appreciate that.
Thanks. Vice President Estrada?
I'll say the same thing. I every time I have a concern, the staff is always very responsive. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good, and I'll pass on comments right now. Getting into meetings, we had the CRB on the September 15th.
Yeah, that was held about a few weeks ago on Zoom. Number of issues to go over. The water reports were in the general manager's report about the Colorado River, and it's continuing to be problematic. And I've got other meetings to talk about too. So, and then the 6-agency committee approved some funding of weather modification up in the upper basin to increase snowpack when available. So it's about a $300,000 commitment from the lower basin on about $1 million budget. So.
Yeah. And does that cover 6-agency as well?
Yep.
And I believe when Director Estrada, were you there also? Or?
Yeah, I was there on both of them.
On the Zoom.
On both of them. So also on the 6-agency committee meeting.
Okay.
And a lot of the information was, I was happy that, we got to hear Director Nelson's comments at the previous meeting, which was, I think, a day before, some days before this meeting. And I think a lot of what he said was what was covered in this meeting related to the kind of the water reality and on the Colorado and those triggers and those models. It sounded pretty drastic.
Yeah, thank you. See, Golf and Water on September 22nd. That was a Zoom. I don't know. I was on it. Good, well attended. I mean, kind of a lot on the agenda. I thought the interesting part, I kind of was off that group for a while and then back on, and so I had missed whatever happened in the middle, but we had developed these water budgets, and I mean, it was sort of a clamoring among the group for why can't CVWD implement penalties, really. I think that's what they were asking us to do, which we really have no way to do on well water use. We don't have tiered rates or anything on that. And I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I suggested, maybe you guys can come up with your own award system to recognize people that are efficient using water. I just don't know that there's that much desire to do that in that group, but I know we talked about it.
Well, I mean,
and it tends to be the ones that are doing a good job are present, and the ones that aren't there. So.
Right.
How do you do that?
There is a core that attends, and I think we do benefit by having Craig Kessler run those meetings. Initially, the history of this is that the golf industry came to us because of articles that were appearing in the Desert Sun. They were being targeted by Ian, and they basically decided that they needed to work with us. And Dan Ferris chaired that meeting for, I think, the first 2 years. And then Craig has kind of stepped in, but I will say there's not a great deal of participation from the industry in those meetings. And if not for Craig, I would recommend that we drop the whole thing, because they're either going to do something on their own or they're not. There was a lot of discussion about having tiered rates, and we thought that might be possible under Sigma. We have developed budgets for them to look at and consider on their own. But there are a number of different factions within each golf course that tend to make decision-making very hard. There's the board, there's the membership board, there's the HOA that surrounds the golf course that has a certain expectation of how the courses will look. There's the playability. I mean, there's a lot of things there, and I just don't appreciate being on that side of the discussion, how hard it is to get anything done. But, we have meetings, we keep the channel communication open. I just don't know that we're being that successful in actually moving the ball.
Well, we're still part of the largest industry in the Coachella Valley.
Yes, yeah.
And that is what's important. So whatever direction they would like to go, we're there to just facilitate whatever direction they want to go, and that's the way we should do it.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing.
That's what's important, because,
I agree.
it is, part of this community, it's the largest part of the community.
I mean, developing those water budgets is a really tool, a really great tool. I just don't know that there's very many of them that are actually using it for something. And that's because they have all these other factors, you know, I mean, the budget being one of them. I mean, the money budget, how do you justify spending $1 million upgrading your irrigation system when it's only going to produce a $50,000 savings? You know, I mean, this is why it's not happening. I think, whatever. I still think that they could do well by creating a standard that either you're certified that you're efficient or you're not, and it's something that they recognize and they can advertise in their newsletters and in their clubhouses to their members. And it's and at some point somebody's going to come up and go, how come you guys aren't efficient? And maybe that'll stir some of their desire to do that. I don't know, but those aren't the people in the meetings. No. They're not doing that. Anyways, okay. And we have data that we produce, but it's all on the aggregate. So I think that was part of the frustration, is they know that they're better than the aggregate numbers. So who's bringing the group down? Yeah. All right. Salt and Sea Authority on the 23rd.
We had a presentation on mitigation implementation plan for the Salton Sea, and then we went over committee assignments.
And I was not in attendance.
Okay. September 27th, preparation for Lower Basin meeting, Director Nelson.
Yeah, we had a number of Lower Basin meetings, which I'll get to at the end, and Lower Basin meeting, yeah, we're just getting ready for another meeting.
Yeah, understandable.
I got a ton of those today.
Yep. Let's see, Director Estrada, the EAC meeting yesterday. That happened.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, we had 4 different projects. We went over some reservoirs. I believe the sewer project on I think we're calling it the Palm View, which is around airport. And then we went over the project on Avenue 66 for Sunbird, also a big project. And I can't remember the last one, but all good. So they should be coming to the board in a few weeks, a few months, or after the comment period.
Thank you. And then we had the disadvantaged communities meeting also yesterday afternoon. Directors Estrada and I were there. I was on the phone, and honestly, I could hear the people near the mic really well, which was Director Estrada and Jim and Carrie, but it was hard to hear the other ones. It goes on and off, yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
See if we can set up a better connection there. I don't know what's possible. We used to put the phone in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, really, you'd get every other word on. You guys were great, but then I couldn't hear the other ones. So then you're kind of guessing what they said, right?
Yeah, sorry about that. We'll work on that. I think that may be easier to resolve. Rummins, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. You need those little spider
Speakers,
things.
the people that are going to say comments, would get up and move closer to the microphones.
Yeah.
Set up, if we know in advance, I can have the mics that we use for the study sessions.
Oh, the handhelds.
That might work. Anyways, go ahead with the presentation, Director Estrada.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair comment. I think it's not the first time that we've heard that there are issues with the mic, and maybe we just either need to put it in the center or maybe put another one on the other side, because that, as you know, that it's like a roundtable discussion, and we tend to put the mics closer to Carrie, who kind of helps us chair the meeting and kind of run through the agenda, and so it's on that side, whoever sits on that side, that I think you're able to hear pretty clearly. But as you go to the other side, it's pretty far away. So I think that's a good comment. Thanks for making it. But we went over all the projects that we're working on in that area there for purposes of trying to bring services to those existing communities. And a comment that I made yesterday at the beginning of the meeting was that there's a lot of even as we are moving these projects through that EAC meeting, it just shows that, you know, these projects are getting closer and closer to a point of construction. And so, you know, I think we're gonna see a lot of activity here pretty soon. No, that was pretty much it. I think it was a good meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I know I'm sure there are additional meetings to report on. I have 2, so I'll get those out of the way first. Jim and I went and met with 29 Palms Tribe at their casino on the 15th of September. And I think that's all I can say about that. 23rd, which was, I guess, last week, I had a request from Jackie Lopez, who's now working, in private. She used to be with Congressman and Mike Rover. It was really non-specific, but it was about the Thousand Palms levee. The Berger Foundation owns property over there, you know, around the Classic Club, and they and I basically told them to reach out to Carrie Oliphant, but they think that they have access potentially to federal funding for some of that work. And I told them, you know, that we're really active on the North Indio project, but that I wasn't sure about where we are on some of these other, you know, upstream of that. And so they'll probably be reaching out, if they haven't already, to you, Carrie, and then maybe we can do a joint meeting. And I suggested that, I don't know whose director's territory that is, whether that's Bianco or Aguilar, but maybe pull in one of you, depending on whose area that is. Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah. So maybe we do that.
President Powell,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious to I'm curious to understand whether is there a proposed project or why the need to push for this levy, or I guess
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I'm guessing they want the flood protection, you know, that for future development.
Okay.
But I really don't have any. There were no specifics. I asked for information prior to the meeting. I didn't get it. So
We have had a number of discussions about flood control issues with the developers for the arena, which is very close to the Classic Club. I don't know whether this is related to those issues or whether this would be a separate issue that.
right, and when we talked a little bit about that, I guess they have what they need for the arena. Otherwise, they wouldn't be building it.
I think they're working on it. I don't think I've signed a Clomar yet, so.
Yeah.
I think we're still reviewing what they've given us.
Anyways, I mean, they're under construction, right?
That's a county issue. County issues the conditional building permit, and we are working through the flood control issues, which they want a LOMAR, not a CLOMAR, and the LOMAR is supposed to be based on existing conditions, which don't yet exist.
Right. So anyways, there's probably going to be some follow-up on that one.
I'll just say that, Jim, it's at least my understanding that they might be two separate issues, because I've had some conversations where I've asked a question about, hey, are there any issues with FEMA? Because I remember we saw that email came through, and the response that I received was that staff was being very helpful, and they were doing whatever they needed to do to resolve that. So I imagine that it's not related specifically to the arena.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about that arena, it's a great project, but they're getting their power served by IID, which, you know, it's got to be a huge demand or a huge load there. Anyways, they seem to be okay with it. Like, they're getting their needs served.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Because there's probably capacity on whatever substation that is.
I mean, think about it, you know, ice and all that, that's got to be a tremendous amount of power. All right. Any other board members with
additional meetings?
Yeah, I had one.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I had a meeting on the 21st with the county to kind of get back on track as it relates to that Avenue 70 transmission main that we're hoping gets built to consolidate a number of mobile home parks along that alignment. And it was primarily, maybe it was triggered by the issue at Oasis Mobile Home Park. I think there's still a belief that a line would be helpful to them as well, as we know that any effort to relocate those folks is still maybe a few years away. So getting that line in place to kind of use it as an interim solution, I think the community believes is helpful. I think it's something that EPA has also kind of indicated that they would be supportive of, something that could, get those property owners there from having to rely on their own operation and their wells that they operate. And so, as you may recall, the issue that we ran into was the unfortunate passing of Mr. Lawson, the property owner, and then from that point on, we kind of stalled because we needed to get through the application process for the right-of-way with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which required certain signatures now that Mr. Lawson had passed away. So that was finally something that we were able to resolve through the help of the county. And at yesterday's meeting at the DAC task force meeting, we were happy to report as a group that that letter has been received by CBWD for purposes of initiating that right-of-way application or continuing on that application with the BIA to acquire the right-of-way on Avenue 70. So that was a big step forward, something that needed to take place, and so that's what we talked about.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, I have a few. I'm not sure if I reported on these last time, but on September 3rd, I had a Basin States meeting with Interior, and we talked about some of Colorado's problems with the Colorado River modeling. And so we walked through that, and we also looked at some of the 5-year projection and what the rollout would be. And then I had a meeting afterwards, and I think Robert was on that. We reported to the California agencies. That was on the 3rd. And then on the 7th, I had a panel call with Ann Castle as our panel leader. Later in the month, we had a Water Education Foundation Symposium, and I represented California on that panel and the Lower Basin. So that was on the 7th. On the 8th, we finally got the full preview from Commissioner Camille and Assistant Secretary Trujillo on the rollout of the preview of the rollout of the 2- and 5-year studies, which take a probabilistic approach rather than a historical approach, which is quite different. And in my opinion, quite more based on reality of where we're at today. It takes a much shorter, it takes the last 20 years, not the last 100 years. So it really does, I think, do a better job at forecasting. So we got the preview of that on the 8th. And then on the 9th, the Water Education Foundation had a Bay Delta virtual tour, which instead of 3 days, it was just 1, which was good. And Nick Gray and Jennifer Bowles did, I think, a great job at doing the virtual tour on that, and learned a lot about the Delta and where our state water project comes from. A number of panelists on there, and it was good. So that was on the 9th. On the 17th, another Basin States meeting with Interior, and that was right the day, a couple days before the rollout of the 2- to 5-year study. So that was on the 17th. On the 22nd was the rollout info call. So, you know, there were about 150 participants on that call of the rollout. There were a lot of good questions, a lot of good comments on that rollout. And it's available on their website now, which is a good resource. But when the Bureau talks about the highest probable, the mid probable, and the lowest probable, well, on either side of those, there's still probabilities of, you know, even higher hydrology or even drier hydrology. And so I think it's a really good presentation of that now. So that was on the 22nd. And then on the 23rd was actually the Water Education Foundation Colorado River Symposium, and I was a panelist. This was really to replace the Santa Fe meeting that occurs every 2 years. So that was on the 23rd, and I think that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Do we have a motion to approve per diem for the meetings reported on?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Aye.
Director Bianco,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Aye.
and Director Nelson. Director Nelson?
Oh, aye.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thought I heard my name. So that was approved 5-0. General Manager's report.
Yes, sir. To be quick, just to update you again on the numbers, we've had about 110 recovered positive COVID cases. We've got 0 current, although we do have 5 folks that are described as direct contacts, so they're not at work. We've had 2 total cases in September. I am currently working my way through 18 different COVID vaccination education seminars or scenarios or talks or presentations with staff. Our interpretation of President Biden's executive order and the guidelines that have come out last week do require federal contractors to have employees fully vaccinated by December 8th. And we are passing that word on to our folks because we do consider ourselves federal contractors because of the Colorado River water deliveries, both with the Department of Interior and under the QSA. The big problem here, or I guess the challenge, has been when Governor Newsom came out and required all state workers to be vaccinated, he also allowed there to be testing on a regular basis. I believe when President Biden initially came out, he also allowed for testing of federal workers. Federal contractors, however, do not have that testing option. So we are explaining to our folks that they have basically a limited amount of time remaining to make their decisions on whether or not they will receive the vaccine. I'm not trying to convince them what they should do. That's a personal decision that they can make with their family and their medical provider. And we certainly will allow for, as much as the federal government will, allow for both religious and medical exemptions, or in the parlance of human resources, reasonable accommodations. It is my understanding, however, that across the country, some of those religious exemptions are not being accepted by state and local governments. I just don't have a read on where the federal government is and how it applies to us in this program. And that would conclude my comments, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that people have a right to object on those grounds, as long as they're, you know, like the medical should be from a doctor's note, right?
Correct. We will require documentation for vaccinations and for exemptions. And unfortunately now there do seem to be a number of counterfeit vaccination cards out there. So we've told the staff that we will be spot checking those. Certainly a digital card is preferable to a cardboard card, but you know, we will be checking.
Can't you just go online and check?
Can we go online and check our employees' status? I don't think there's an access for that. You can go online and create a digital card yourself. And what I have found in working with my own family members is they're not able to get that digital card correctly if they don't use the same phone number or the same email address that they had on their written application.
Okay.
So, you just got, that's the one piece that's missing. We do know their name, we know their birth date, but we don't necessarily know what email address or phone number they used to get a digital card.
And the person who put that information had to have put it incorrect too.
Yes, I found that one of my doses was not in.
wrong.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
That's another
was not in there correctly.
I mean, one of our family members showed up to a doctor's appointment and says, new. Oh yeah, I see you're vaccinated. So, I mean.
So healthcare providers may have the ability to check that. I don't know that we can certainly look and see, but I think that may be
Just
private.
a question. I'm not advocating the position.
Okay. Thank you. Council report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. AB 361 was signed by the governor as an urgency bill and will go into effect on October 1. This allows for the use or the continued use of virtual meetings as long as there is a state-proclaimed state of emergency, such as the current COVID state of emergency. It's the overall governor-proclaimed proclamation. It has nothing to do with any particular executive orders. What does that mean? For the first meeting that a board has in October, the same rules that you've applied currently can be followed, and you can have virtual meetings. But at that first meeting, we will be working with your board clerk to put together a resolution that makes a finding that because there's a state of emergency at the state level that mandates or recommends social distancing, that based on that for the next 30 days, this board can determine to continue to have the option of virtual meetings. And then every 30 days thereafter, there's a resolution, a format that you can have on your consent calendar to re-up the declaration by the board that yes, the COVID state of emergency remains in place. Yes, social distancing is part of those recommended measures, and therefore you can continue to have virtual meetings. If so, hopefully someday the COVID proclamation goes away by the governor, and if so, then there will be no opportunity for virtual meetings the way that we've been doing them, unless there's a future state-proclaimed emergency for fire, wildfires, or something else.
Okay.
And just to be clear, as long as there's a actual state of emergency, and we go through the process that I just described, you can continue to have virtual meetings like we have. Once that is over, then we have to go back to the old teleconference rules where you would have to post an agenda at wherever you are and allow the public to be there to participate in public comment. So AB 361 does provide for virtual meetings as long as the current COVID state of emergency remains in place. We will return to you next month with a resolution to make that formalized, as well as new language for John to mention on the agenda. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll have that in place in November. I might be remote one day in November, so. Any departmental reports?
No departmental reports that I'm aware of, but I do think we have a legislative update.
Oh, this is the one that we've
We were
been,
trying to do this last time.
yeah, okay, good.
And I believe this is also Victoria's first time before the board.
It is. President Powell, members of the board, good morning. So actually, being that this was tabled last time, I'll request that we table it again. Being that on Thursday, we do have the legislative committee meeting. And so at the October 12th meeting, I'll come with a full legislative brief.
That sounds great. Thank you.
So I guess this doesn't count as your first time.
No, not yet.
All right, well then this gets us to this 12A, which is an item where two of our board members are recused
And excused.
and will be leaving the room.
So just for the record, this is the recusal under the OASIS project where a recusal and requalification was put in place a couple of years ago now for 3 board members to constitute a quorum to consider OASIS matters, and the recusal of directors Nelson and Bianco.
Okay. And Yeah, and so yeah, you guys, you don't need to return because all we have left is adjournment after this.
No closed session.
Just a closed session, right?
No, sir.
No, there's no closed session.
You're free to depart the paddock.
Free to go. Free to go as soon as.
First.
See Anthony. I think I brought it up twice at the first meeting. No, he said, oh, we got that covered. It's like, what are you going to sell it out of state? Yeah, but the person they sell it to is, yeah, I know, it's, yeah. So, okay, so here we are constituted as the Oasis Board, and we're being asked to approve and authorize this irrigation water service agreement with Bagdasarian Farms. Go ahead, Carrie.
Yes, so it's recommended that the Board of Directors approve and authorize the General Manager to execute 2 irrigation water service agreements with Bagdasarian Farms related to the Oasis Inlet Recharge Project Phase 2. We have 2 types of irrigation water service agreements. Scenario 1 is for when the property owner wants immediate service, and scenario 2 is for when the property owner wants service at a later date. So we have one of each. Scenario 1 is for service to 12 parcels outside ID1, Irrigation District 1 boundary. And scenario 2, we have, it covers 30 parcels outside ID1. So if you want additional information, I'm happy to go into it further. However, it's all included in the board agenda item.
Thank you. You know, so this one, I know that this was up back on the 14th, and I had some concerns about it, which were addressed. I mean, one of them was collection of the IWAA, and under our existing rules and regs, it's specific that the IWAA is only collected inside of ID1, and since this entire project is outside of ID1, this Bagdasarian project is outside of ID1, it would not apply.
That's correct.
So there was originally some language that we've removed from the staff report regarding that. You know, I think that's probably a topic for the full board that we should bring back to discuss whether or not the IWAA should be applied to properties outside of ID1. You know, it's not really clear to me. I mean, my gut reaction is yes, because even though the rate includes money to pay for this, these improvements, it doesn't really include for some of the other things that the IWA is used for, which would be, you know, kind of the rest of the system. And so,
yeah.
Anyways, I think that might.
We can bring that, would it be convenient to bring that back when we talk about the air gaps? It could all fall under irrigation rules and regs items or something?
It sounds good to me.
If we can, I mean, I don't know how long we'll need. We've got the 2 meetings in October, one in November, one in December, but I don't know that there's any urgency to either of these at this time.
No, I don't see urgency for it either necessarily, but I don't know about the air gap one. But
okay.
But it's something that it seems like an inconsistency that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
But it's not going to be addressed through any agreements we have with Bagdasarian. It's going to be through the rules and regs. Yeah.
Right.
Can I make sure that I'm understanding it correctly here? What you're saying, John, is that this is also impacted by that by the policy that Director Nelson brought up related to a potential a potential, canal user? Is that it?
No.
Is
No.
referencing, is this not it, or?
This has nothing to
So how
do, I don't think it has anything to do with that. We were
No,
just,
right.
we were just talking about, that's also a potential amendment to the rules and regs.
And then the specific, so that's a separate, so
Yeah.
now it sounds like there's two. There's that one, and then there's one that you just tried to identify, and I kind of missed what your concern was.
Oh, well, that the current rules and regs only apply the irrigation water availability assessment to properties inside of ID1. And so there's no provision or no rule that would allow us to collect IWAA for properties outside of ID1. And if that is something we want to do, it's something that I think the full board would consider as a change to the rules and regs.
Don't we have that surcharge that tries to do that, or is that more so for the tax?
The surcharge makes up for the portion of the ID1 tax that's not collected on these properties outside of ID1, so it's separate.
But I guess if we're going to look at IWAA outside of ID1, it would it, I'm trying to figure out, would it cover the Mid-Valley Pipeline use of canal water? Because then we're talking about, I mean, it's outside ID1.
I don't think so. I think it specifically says for irrigation water users inside of ID1, so we would just change the boundary.
Yeah, and I'd be concerned about getting too much of a
Yeah,
discussion about it.
it's a different topic, but I think those are the things we need to talk about.
Okay.
At that other, I don't have it in front of me. Well, it's in here somewhere.
Got it.
But anyways, that was one of the things. So we pulled that out of this.
Yes.
And maybe it'll come back later for everybody outside of ID1. I think we added a time limit to scenario 2, and I'll be honest, I
No,
didn't.
we actually didn't add the time limit.
So they're always, there's no requirement for them to do it in a certain period of time?
No.
Because scenario 2 is for where they
Future.
might take water in the future.
In the future, yes.
So, okay, so there's no time limit on there. And then just to be clear, I think this project's a little different from others in that, because of the scenario 2, they actually have property that they want to include in the project that is not eligible for irrigation water because they're not currently irrigating those properties.
Right.
They have a well, or maybe more than one well, that irrigates a portion of this project, and that's the scenario 1 portion.
Right.
And what I suspect is going to happen is that once you deliver canal water to that portion, they'll then use the well to irrigate the next portion, which would be to the west of what they're currently irrigating. And there might even be 3 phases of that as they go into, based on the capacity of the well. So it's a little different than what we've done in the past. I don't think we don't have any rules that would restrict them from doing that. The restriction is on using well water on the existing farmed acres or existing irrigated acres, but not on other acres.
Right.
So that
Are you,
well. Yeah, go ahead.
I think there was a comment that the wells would be currently located in the area that's within ID1, and you're suspecting that once that receives water, that then they would move the water from those wells those wells pumping from the ID1 area out of the ID1 area to that second portion?
Yeah, so the wells are located outside of ID1, but they are pumping water from the aquifer that ID1 overlies.
But, okay, but we have the situation with, I guess the boundary that really matters is it the area of benefit boundary? And because it seems to me that we kind of had a similar situation where there was a project that was moving water from one area to another area, although it was the same property owner, and that was with I forget the name of those folks, but I believe they might have been the first to kind of go through this process where you could get that whatever it was the 1.5 above your historical pumping.
Right.
I'm trying to make sure that I'm understanding the ID1 the ID1 guidelines correctly. My understanding is that it had to do with the area of benefit, that you could be within the aquifer but outside the area of benefit, and if you were pumping from a well that was outside the area of benefit, it wouldn't qualify. But that's not the case here.
Right, yeah, this well is with, even though it's outside of ID1, it's pumping from the aquifer that ID1 overlies.
Right, it's within the area of benefit.
Which is, yeah, the area benefit.
So
Right.
the area of benefit becomes important because if the well is outside the area of benefit, we do not, by policy, collect the replenishment.
I can't hear you. Jim,
Sorry, the area of benefit becomes important for collection of the replenishment charges. If the well is outside the area of benefit, we do not collect RAC. But that is not the case here. The well is inside the area of benefit, and so the concern or the question is, it appears they only have one functional well with a large amount of property. And so once we start canal deliveries to the eastern portion, they'll continue to use the same well with longer pieces of pipe to irrigate the rest of the property. And initially there was a question about whether the well had to be taken out of service completely once canal water is delivered. And I think we're kind of saying, well, for purposes of canal water irrigation, the well should be turned off for that property that's receiving canal water unless the canal water service is interrupted. But if they wanted to take that same well and begin irrigating different property, there is no restriction that we could find right now that would prevent that, if that's not too confusing.
Okay, well, it's kind of, I get that that perhaps it's not in the language of whatever we put together to try to create some rules and regs, but help me understand this. And I'm not against it. I'm just trying to find some comfort here, and I'm trying to understand the idea of an in lieu recharge project when we're not removing the well.
I guess we're making the distinction, and it's I guess it's a little tentative, that the well is servicing particular parcels right now, and when they start receiving canal water, the well will be turned off for irrigation purposes to those parcels that will be receiving canal water. But the well could be turned back on for different parcels. And once those different parcels have got their 12 months of history of well water, they would become eligible to receive canal water. So rather than requiring them to have, if it's a 3-phase project, to have 3 different wells, it is conceivable that they could irrigate all 3 off the same well. It's a time phase of when that single well is irrigating different parcels, if that makes sense.
And then to the comment that this is perhaps not urgent, was there a portion that we were hoping to make a motion on and then bring another portion back, or are we completely pushing the entire item to a later time?
I think the question came up because we used a template for the BAI, and the template had irrigation water availability assessment language in it. And so as we were reviewing it, we were trying to figure out, well, why is this in there? It should have been struck and not included because the parcels themselves are outside ID1, and irrigation water availability assessment is only collected for parcels inside ID1. And so that's the question that President Powell would like us to look at and bring back. to the full board about whether or not there would be a basis to charge irrigation water availability assessments, not just to this parcel outside ID1, but to any parcel outside ID1.
Okay, but you're still hoping to, at a minimum, approve and authorize the irrigation water service agreement?
Yes.
Okay, and as it relates to that agreement, or the portion that we're trying to have a motion on today, is that urgent?
Well, it's not really urgent as far as the irrigation water availability assessment goes, but I think the owner of the property would like to know whether or not he's going to be eligible to receive canal water.
So President Powell had said, I had asked if I could bring this issue of the IWAA outside of ID1 back at the same time as I brought the informational item on the air gaps that Director Nelson brought up. And that's when President Powell said, yes, and it's not a matter of urgency. So we were talking about the informational item, not the board item in front of us. We would like to get this board item approved today because we are actively out there constructing the project, and we need to know if we are to provide them with water service.
Okay, I guess where I'm getting hung up right now is the well, whether this well can service that other phase, the other scenario, and I don't know that I have the full understanding of maybe the rules and regs or the ID1 guidelines in front of me, and so what I'm hoping to do is maybe have a more in-depth discussion as it relates to that. Not that I'm against it, allowing. I feel like I don't feel like I have all the information to feel comfortable.
So, and if I may, what you have before you is an application for these agreements based on our current rules and regulations. So I would be concerned if this matter were put off because you wanted to have a conversation about something that might result in future changes to the rules and regulations, but you have before you an applicant who is meeting all the current requirements that are on the books. So if there are concerns and you want to discuss changes based on the concerns that have been raised, Vice President Estrada, that's important. But for an applicant who has met all the requirements for the current rules and regulations, to put that off for a future discussion, I would have some legal concerns about that.
Yeah, and just the relevant, Director Estrada, I'm looking at the rules and regs. So the portion about, what do you do with your well, right? After you get the delivery of Colorado River water, it's 5-3.3. I'll just read it because it's pretty short. The customer shall reduce annual groundwater production or use so that no more than 20% of the water used on the property is groundwater. And property, I believe, is the portion that is subject to this first agreement, which is scenario 1.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's the part that's currently being irrigated. Additional groundwater may be utilized to service the property in the event of water restrictions. Customers shall take full responsibility for not having a redundant water for not having a redundant water supply. So we're asking him to keep the well available in case our system doesn't provide him water. But there's nothing in the rules and regs that says he cannot use that well for some other purpose. You just can't use it to irrigate the portion that's receiving the canal water.
Correct.
Yeah, and and even as you read that, I kind of understand it as the property is the entire property. It's contiguous. I imagine it's the same owner, or the attempt here is to be under the same owner. And so I would say that if we would limit the amount of water that he can use to 20%, then I think we would be within the guidelines. But to say that all of a sudden this other area is a completely separate property, to me, it's a contiguous piece of land, and
Director Estrada,
So-
there's two agreements here, though.
The word property is defined in the rules and regs. Any real property, including, just kind of weird that it's capitalized because you're using the word for its own definition, but it should probably be lowercase. Any real property, including any lot, parcel, premise, dwelling unit, or building unit, or portion thereof, that is the subject of a request for service or to which service is being rendered, and that would be the scenario one
Right.
property.
Right.
Right,
Yeah, because they're two separate
two
agreements.
separate agreements.
And the scenario one property, as I understand it, is the property that's currently being irrigated, right?
Right,
Yeah.
because that's the one that they want service to
Yeah.
initially.
I mean, they may want to break scenario two down into two separate applications as well if they don't do the whole thing in one deal. Yeah.
So that's my concern, is that the regulations are being met to a T, and to do something different. I'm not discounting the concern with perhaps changing those rules and regulations, but for this applicant today who has met these requirements that are currently on the books, I'd have a concern about not approving it on that basis.
So since we have two service agreements here, was the hope that we would move on both of the scenarios, or if
Yes,
or are
if we could approve both of them today, that would be great. These are the last two out of about 26 agreements, so.
is this the only one with this type of this type of situation? Is this unique?
We do have one or two other scenario two agreements.
That are already approved?
Yeah. Yes. We
yes.
have at least one.
Where we have the same situation where
Oh, yeah, I have the list. Red Globes Properties has a scenario two, and so there's that one.
One other, okay.
Was approved on June 24th.
Is it your sense, John, that their hope was to do the same thing, where they would move the water from one property to the other property?
I suspect that. I have not spoken to them, but when you look at what they're doing now, it appears that they're irrigating the amount of land that well has capacity to irrigate.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I have a sense. I have a sense that we had a conversation back when we were trying to put the rules and regs together, or the ID1 guidelines, where we had a conversation about a contiguous, or there was I recall a conversation about land being contiguous, and how that played into I think it was related to the fact that we had some concerns where you were actually promoting maybe additional growth in agriculture, or for whatever reason that wasn't viewed as a real in lieu, that because you were using the same well to then now put into production a piece of property that has been historically been idle. And so I recall that we had a conversation like that, and now I'm trying to remember what that conversation was about, because it seems that if at that point we were saying, well, look, it's not really in lieu recharge because you're actually putting into production idle land, then it's not really in lieu. So I just want to make sure that we weren't saying that back then, and now we're saying something different. And I don't know right now if anybody here recalls. Jim, maybe you recall. I don't know if you recall anything related to a conversation about property that was contiguous.
I don't recall the contiguous part. I do recall a landowner developing two wells and coming in and asking for canal water when he had not quite met the requirement to grow a crop. but I don't remember that as being contiguous. The contiguous part comes in when we apply the IWAA, that parcels that are contiguous of a certain size qualify, and ones that aren't contiguous, that aren't of a certain size, don't qualify.
Yeah, Director Stroud, I do recall it. I know it was one of those issues that I personally wasn't thrilled about. We had kind of the basic part of it was that you have a well that produces water that irrigates a crop. And we have that in this situation. I think folks, if they're trying to game the system, that's the hurdle that's hardest to get over. These folks put in a well, they're irrigating this crop. I think it's lemons. And, I don't think there's anything in our rules and regs that prevent them from doing kind of a leapfrog where they do portion, they get the canal water, and then they do another portion, and then they get the canal water there, and then they do another portion. I think, it doesn't sound great because it sounds like we're providing this in lieu water, not so much to help the aquifer as it is to facilitate expansion of a farm. But I also don't think there's anything that we've done that would prevent them from doing that. And I was aware of it. I mean, we discussed the scenario at the time, and we didn't put a restriction in that says you have to, restrict use of that well water to that parcel only, or that project only.
And in the long run, they're ultimately going to be using canal water for the whole property, and that provides
Right.
the benefit.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I
That
think,
in lieu part.
yeah, we didn't put in such a high hurdle that they would have had to have well water on the entire project, all three phases at the beginning.
Right.
We didn't do that.
Okay, maybe I just got another piece of information that's helpful for me. Is the scenario 2 area with the 30 parcels, is that currently being farmed?
No,
I don't think so, no.
no.
Okay, so I think
It was farmed, 20, 30 years ago, but by a different owner. But it's not,
Okay,
it's not.
And then the other thing that I feel like maybe I need to get a better sense of too is, for example, I believe we had an agreement for a small farmer. It was a small farmer somewhere that was right next to the ID1 boundary, so they had to abide by these outside ID1 guidelines. And my recollection under that scenario was that I believe we were, I don't recall if we were putting a restriction on the amount of water that he could pump in order for him to receive the canal water. And so we I think the mechanism there was that he was abiding by the rule maybe that says, okay, well, you can pump, you can use up to 20% of your well for purposes of maybe expanding your ranch by that amount every year, and then your canal water you would be able to increase it. And so I just want to make sure that that we didn't do something different there, and we didn't allow him under that scenario, under that agreement, to fully make use of his well for purposes of expanding the next area. So if we are concise, then I don't have an issue. But if we
Yeah, I think we are. I think he would have had the same ability to do that leapfrog thing. There were other issues. I forget the name, but there were other issues on that property. I don't think he was paying the rack, things like that. And I think he was actually using some domestic water, and I'm not sure how that fit into the equation.
I think under that agreement, John, there was a push for us to I think make him abide by that 20%, and so then he would, maybe if he wanted to expand his ranch, he was going to be forced maybe to use domestic water. I just want to make sure that, and I don't want to hold this up here, but I would like to at least have staff check into that to make sure that that he had the ability to make full use of this well, and we weren't saying, you can only use 20% of it.
I think it would be appropriate to go back and look at that. I believe that the rules and regs were written consistent with what we told him. I just don't remember the details. It was like a 40-acre. I drove out there. I know it's in North Shore.
Right, but we haven't updated the rules and regs since, so it was in compliance.
It was all consistent with that. Yeah, there were other problems with that.
You get my point, right? I just want to make sure that we didn't say you're limited to using your existing well at a 20% historical, 20% of what your historical has been, because I recall that we were really kind of honing in on this ability to kind of game the system for purpose of expanding your ranch, and I just have this feeling that we made it a point that if he wanted to use his well, he could use it up to 20%, but not 100% to then irrigate whatever 100% could irrigate. And so, if you could do me a favor.
The 20% would be consistent with what you just read, President Powell, from the rules and regs.
Right.
He could continue to use 20% on the property that was defined by the agreement.
Right.
Which is consistent here. We're defining the property under the scenario 1 agreement.
Right.
And then when we go to scenario 2, and if they start irrigating that portion of the property, then they get limited to the 20% there. It just
That
keeps
other
applying.
one, the other one, maybe his issue was that he was taking his entire parcel as property, even
As
though he wasn't
property.
farming the whole thing.
Right.
So it might have behooved him to split it up.
To split it up, exactly.
No, I mean, you don't, if the intent here is to use canal water, I think those are necessary hoops to try to jump over. So if we're going to say you could use your well, then use your well, but don't tell one person use 20% and then the other person say, because now all of a sudden you have the ability to, to try to gain the system, then you can use 100%.
The previous person is getting irrigation water service to the whole property. In this situation, only scenario 1 is getting irrigation water service because they've chosen to enter into a scenario 2 agreement so that they're going to get service later for that property. And the purpose of these agreements initially is to just outline the rate that they are going to pay. So I just want to make that clear. We didn't go through a Prop 218 process. We had a choice. We could go through Prop 218 or we could enter into agreements with the property owners to provide them notification that this was going to be the rate for being part of the Oasis Phase 2 project. And so that is the purpose of these agreements, is to accomplish that task, so that they can't come back and say, we were never given the opportunity or provided the information that you were going to charge us this rate.
Right.
When do you anticipate this scenario 2 would move along, if it ever moved along?
It's up to them. It is up to them. We are just providing them notice that when they become part of the Oasis Phase 2 project and they start irrigating using water from that project, they will be paid this rate, and they will have to comply with all of the rules and regs that are in
I think the relevant one is that they need to provide well production for 12 months. So they would have to establish a farm, plant trees or whatever, and irrigate them with the well water and have sufficient water use on that area to provide numbers for 12 months that are, when they're establishing the tree, I mean, they may need to farm it for a few years in order to get enough water going to make sense.
Right.
Because the young trees might not use enough water
Yeah.
to give them a 12-month number that they're happy with.
Right, and actually, section 1 of the agreement says that at the time the customer desires to irrigation service, to initiate irrigation service to customer property, customer shall fulfill all of the following obligations at his sole expense to CPW's reasonable satisfaction. Shall provide a written notice to CPW at least 6 months in advance, shall comply with the rules and regulations as the same may be amended from time to time regarding design and installation, et cetera. Customer shall furnish to CPW such easement. So we're not giving them any advantage. In fact, we're requiring the same obligations that we have already imposed on other like customers. So to change it now, as once again, gets back to my legal concern.
Yeah,
No, I don't want to change it now. I wouldn't vote for it. I just see it as a loophole. If we're really saying, and I don't know that this is what we're saying, but if we're saying that because under this scenario there's two separate parcels that are contiguous, which are really owned by the same property owner, is my understanding. It just so happens that they want to put the next piece of property in use. That under that scenario, we would allow them to use 100% of the capacity of the well that they're able to pump to irrigate whatever that capacity was. And then on another scenario, we have a piece of property with the same owner who has extra property to continue to irrigate, but we're going to hold them to only use 20% of the capacity of his well for the continuous expansion of his farm. It just seems unfair to me. Well, I get that it's but it just seems like a loophole to me.
The agreements don't go into those details, though. These agreements say, do you want service now or do you want service later? And they've indicated they want service now for certain parcels and service later. We don't know what they're going to do with the parcels on the service later, the scenario 2. They may drill another well. We don't have any control over that. And the point is they have to comply with the rules and regs. And I think President Powell's point was, we don't have anything in the rules and regs that says they have to abandon that well. And so I don't think that it's really appropriate to make these decisions on whether we're going to approve scenario 1 or scenario 2 agreements based on potential conversations in the field or hearsay of what their plans are.
Yeah.
Because these aren't documented in these agreements.
No, I get it. That other case, I think it's Barajas, I think.
It is.
Which I'm pretty familiar with. Let's take a look at that later, because there's a chance, and that would be the full board, it has nothing to do with Oasis, but there's a chance that maybe we hadn't considered the possibility that he could put in an application for only a portion of his parcel, which according to the rules and regs, as I read it, that is allowed. So, because it says parcel or portion thereof that is subject to a request for service. So he could have put in a request for service on a portion of his property that was the portion that's being farmed. And then he would have then he would have been able to do the same thing that these guys are doing.
Yeah, I get it, John, and I think you get what I'm saying. I think staff gets what I'm saying. I'm trying to be fair, and I think at the end of the day, it matters how we interpret how we want to utilize that well. It matters when we say you're going to be subject to utilizing it only to the 20% that you've been historically using it. It matters when you say that, and it matters when you say you could use it to the full capacity that you want. 20% versus 100% is a big, big difference, and it matters.
Yeah,
so
I get it.
That's my only point, and that's the only thing that I'm trying to understand. And under what scenario do we tell someone you could use it 20%, and then under what scenario we could tell someone, which is part of the rules and regs, I think, but it's an important piece that matters. And
yeah, it is.
That's my point.
Yeah, and I agree. And it comes down to how they define the property that they're applying for the water. And I think we're being consistent with that in this case.
Well, those are all my comments.
Yeah, no, I get it. I looked at this thing very closely. I'm on board with you on that. But I still think the agreement is right, based on what we have. All right, anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Director Aguilar?
No, I would just make the motion to approve and authorize the general manager to execute these agreements.
Thank you. I'll second it. So we're going to have a vote by roll call.
Yes.
Go ahead.
President Powell,
Aye.
Vice President Estrada,
Aye.
and Director Aguilar.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie. It was worth the conversation, I think. I spent a lot of time on this just trying to make sure it was right, and I think it is. So appreciate your time there. And I'm looking at the wrong agenda. So we are done. So hearing no objection, with no further business, we are adjourned.